So I'd like to call to order this regular meeting for the month of June 2019 of the Urbana Park District Board of Commissioners. There's no remote attendance been requested for this meeting.
Correct.
So the first item of actual business here is to accept the agenda as presented or else to amend it, and I'm not aware of any desired changes.
I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Aye. You're not going to be tag team today, right?
So you second?
I did say aye.
You said aye. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Going ahead of
That's
schedule.
been moved and seconded.
Yeah, second, third.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously.
Second.
Okay, so this brings us to public comment. Is there anyone here wishing to address the board? Seeing none, then we can move to part B of 3 as new staff introductions, which are always a terrific thing. So
Rich is here, so I'm first.
So I'd like to introduce Trina Vander. This is her third week. She came to us from Michigan, where she was actually director of a couple different parks departments up there. Good timing for her start. The tornado, as everybody knows, came through very shortly after her starting, and so she got her feet in the fire really quick, spending the week out at Larson cleaning up. So to this point, she's been working with Brad, the arborist, and the mowing crew. Next week, we'll probably get her over to helping with athletic fields and landscaping with Georgina. So she kind of gets her feet wet in all the different areas of the park district. And then from there on out, she'll be doing a lot of rotating with the other two grounds maintenance techs, Doug and Jim. So I will let Trina say a few words.
Okay, said I had to keep under 20 minutes, so. No, I'm happy to be here. It's been a great 3 weeks. Like I said, like Doug said, Rich. I've been working with Doug. I was a director, so I told him to watch his job, so I'm next. No, it's been great. I like being on this side of things, working hands-on. Tired of sitting behind a desk, so it's been great being here.
Welcome.
You got a great bunch of people to work with. So.
Oh, yes, very much,
Yep.
yes. Great people.
Welcome aboard.
Well,
Thank you, appreciate it.
I was at a streetscape meeting on Friday morning at the city of Urbana, and they thanked us for all the work that the Urbana Park District did for the tornado cleanup. So
and
just
it was
wanted to
in
make sure you guys got the kudos for that.
And it was the mayor had a letter to the editor, which you also mentioned.
Yeah.
The park district's help.
Yep,
Nice.
we're
So-
glad to help. That was a nice letter. I saw that letter also in the
Yeah, yeah.
paper, so that was very nice of her to give a shout out. So
It was.
happy to do it.
How many trees did we lose at Larson?
3, 4.
One tree uprooted. We took down 4 others to this point that were damaged badly enough to need removal, and we still have 1 more
Wow.
to come out, but it's deeper in the park, so we're saving that for a little later on. Probably a total of 6 trees
A lot of firewood.
and lots of bushes, of course.
When you get your head above water, I should file an insurance claim for that property loss.
Okay,
So keep me in the loop.
okay, very good.
Well,
Well, thank you.
It's quite a start, isn't it?
It was.
Welcome to Tornado Alley.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Trina.
No?
Well, Peyton has not arrived, so
Oh.
I'm not sure where he is, but we will bring him to the July meeting for an introduction.
But don't let reflect on how good he's doing, because he's doing an awesome job.
Good.
Yeah, he really is. I'm not sure if there was cross signals or something, or he got held up, so, but he is doing a fabulous job.
Okay, next item of business is appointments to the 2019-2020 UPDAC class. I think we have a list of suggested new appointees. Oh, Ellen's here to.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, I can answer any questions you have. Yeah, we have 3 applicants who are all self-nominated, and so staff are putting their names forward, recommending their appointment to UPDAC.
I move we approve Nikki Ambrose, Laura Hastings, and Cedric Stratton as, to serve 3-year terms as part of the 1920 class for the UPDAC committee.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously. And that will then, thank you, Ellen.
Sure.
That'll take us on to the UPDAC report, which we have in writing, I believe.
Yeah, Melissa had intended to attend the meeting, but she wasn't feeling well today, so she let me know for sure she was not gonna be here.
Was there any comments or questions on the UPDAC chair's report?
I have a general question. I know you sent me the bylaws.
Yes.
Where are, what are we doing with that? Where is?
With the bylaws?
Right. Mhm.
With the numbers?
I think that we're due for a renew, or a review, not a renew, a review of the bylaws, and I was gonna recommend that the UPDAC Planning Committee of the board get together to start that process and look them over, and then take them at that point to UPDAC for
Okay,
review and discussion.
okay. So LaShonda and I will get together then and talk about that, and then.
Yeah,
okay.
if we can set a time to meet, I think, you know, a quick review of those, and then when we take them to UPDAC as a whole to
Right.
discuss, we
So
can
you
do
want
that
that
at a
as
meeting.
in the autumn?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, So
I
by
mean, we're-
September.
Yeah, because we have the June meeting, and then we break for July,
Right.
and then August is the new members
And
coming
that's
on.
probably not a reasonable time to do it.
No,
Okay.
so I think we have a couple of months,
Okay,
for sure.
They were
Very good.
last approved in 2014, so
Yes.
it's probably
So it's,
reasonable
yeah.
time to review.
I think there've been enough changes that it's
I
a
noticed a few
reasonable thing
things.
to do. Mhm.
yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, moving on then to our consent agenda. And on the consent agenda this evening, our approval of minutes from the May 7th regular study session, the May 14th regular board meeting, action to accept the philanthropy report and gifts listed with gratitude. The 3 monthly receipt of the 3 monthly departmental reports, approval of the monthly paid accounts payable, and action to approve ordinance 2019-07, revising the personnel policy manual. Yes, now, under our rules, any single commissioner can remove any or all of these items from the consent agenda for separate discussion and consideration. Is there any request to do so?
I move that we approve all the action items on the consent agenda and accept all the information items listed on the consent agenda in an omnibus manner.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded, and under our rules, there's to be no further discussion at this point, so let's hold a roll call vote, starting at the left.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously with the 3 required votes for passing anything. And that takes us to financial reports.
Good evening. Good to see you all. I'll be discussing the performance of the Park District for the first month of the fiscal year. While we're not very far in, so you can't really get a good idea of how things are shaping up, this is a good opportunity to get your first glimpse at our overall budget. So the middle column is our original budget and appropriation ordinance is reflected in this information. So you can see how our total revenues and total expenditures should be shaping up throughout the year. But this first look at revenues isn't going to tell us too much at this point. And the other thing that's missing is our property taxes, because we received no property tax distributions in May, which is very unusual. Typically, we receive our first property tax distribution around May 20th, and it's usually a huge chunk, probably $2 million of our total extension. And then we receive another big chunk in June, and then we don't really receive a lot until the September distribution. But property tax bills were mailed out around May 20th, and so payments have started coming in at the treasurer's office. We're hopeful that we'll receive a distribution in June. Typically, the treasurer's office has 30 days to disperse the funds they've collected. So, I mean, technically, depending on when they actually started collecting, it might be July, but the time we receive. But I think that a lot of the other local taxing entities are desperate to receive that first distribution as soon as possible. And luckily, we're not desperate. We're okay. So, but it doesn't help because a lot of our funds aren't liquid. They're in CDs or things that we can't access. So, we are tapped, but it's not like we're desperate. There's other entities I've read in the paper are taking out loans and things like that, tax warrants and things so that they can pay them back. So I'm glad that we're healthy. We have a healthy fund balance to be able to get through situations like this and things we can't predict. But it is very unusual that we haven't received any property taxes yet by this point in the year. Total expenditures so far for May were $510,000, which you've heard me say before, in a normal month, that's a pretty typical amount. So that includes 2 payrolls and getting our summer up and running. So that's shaping up pretty nicely in a normal month. Page 2 is our capital improvements fund, sum 2 on the second page. We received $23,000 in revenue, and we had $7,500 in expenditures during that period. It was a pretty slow month for expenditures. Most of our expenditures that we paid were actually for FY19. So they're not reflected in these reports. They're reflected in the year-end balance column, the furthest column on the left, but it'd be hard to compare that compared to what we usually look at. So, but Andy spent a lot of his time wrapping up all the contracts through the end of 4/30 so that we could get our payables all ready for audit. And lastly, for the district, for all funds district-wide, at the end of May, we're looking at a total ending fund balance of $7,128,000, which is actually probably pretty close to where our ending fund balance is going to wind up at, around $7 million at the end of FY19. So we're in pretty good shape. Moving on to the treasurer's report. All of our funds are represented for a total cash on hand of $8,702,000. We have $7.6 million out in investments, if you move on to page 2 of the treasurer's report. I'm working with Busey Wealth Management. We finally were able to close out the pool pack contract. So I'm working with Busey Wealth Management. They originally transferred out $300,000 for our portion of that project out of the English fund. And there's around $12,000 left over that I'm transferring back to them to reinvest. So when all is said and done, it didn't cost us quite as much as we had planned. So that's good. And so I'm working with them to do that this week. And typically I also, normally in this list of investments is investments with Busey Investment Services. We usually have been having about $1 million of CDs with them throughout the year. I usually have those CDs mature in April so that I can reanalyze our liquidity needs and then decide on investments again in May. But with the property taxes not coming, I probably won't make that decision until we've received at least one of our distributions. So I'll probably be looking at June. Well, it is June and I haven't done it yet, but I'm gone next week. So maybe by the week after I'll start before the end of the month if I can. And it's pretty easy to get together with them and make some of those decisions. So there were no changes to interfund loans for May, and total disbursements of funds were $775,000.
I move we accept the treasurer's report for audit.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on the matter?
I actually want to make one discussion point, sorry. The difference between the 500,000 that was in the revenue and expenditures report and the 775 is payables. So this report includes every dollar that we physically paid out, and the revenue and expenditure report has them split between fiscal years. So the 550 is only what was applicable to FY20. The rest was in FY19. Just wanted to make that clear.
I had a question that, I mean, it doesn't, I might as well ask it now. Can somebody explain to me the stormwater fee
Yes.
setup? I mean, I know what it is, but I was curious because there was such a big difference between for the Nature Center, for example, and I think it was Leal was the other one that I was looking at.
Derek's
How do
the
they-
best person.
Yeah,
Yep. It's calculated based upon impervious surface, and so the city has a GIS map of all the parking lots, and they tax themselves for roads. And so each park has a separate tax rate based upon
Right.
how much impervious surface it has. And so that's really why, I mean, it's just a matter of how much concrete surface it has. I think, as I recall, billing is a little different too for leased sites from the sanitary district.
Yes.
Is that,
Yeah, leased sites, the sanitary district passes it through every 2 months to us, so we're paying it throughout. But the city of Urbana bill that was just in here, that's everything else that's not leased. So
Gotcha.
Ambox, Patterson, Hickory are leased, is that
Yep,
right?
that's right.
And so those we pay every 2 months, and then all the rest, they give us one lump sum bill after the period, so it's all payable to FY19.
the other thing is that all of our sites that have direct discharge to a stream, so
Yeah.
if they're in the Crystal Lake Park on the Saline, Perkins on the Saline, Meadowbrook Park on McCullough, get a 50% discount because there's less
less
storm
stormwater to
obstruction.
deal with.
Yeah, right.
Does the fact, so actually, the Nature Center is separate from the rest of the park?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think,
That, does a parking lot, does that get divided up between the Nature Center and the pool?
it's based on parcel numbers. So
Ah,
we're able to
okay.
divide it up pretty well.
Okay.
I'd have to look back at the bill, and I can certainly send
No,
you that
no, I'm just-
information, but
I'm just looking for a
we do our
broad-
best to split it up accordingly. I think that the pool and the nature center might be on the same parcel number, and so we just take that one and split it in half, or whatever
Sure.
we need to do to get
Makes sense.
the bill paid.
Now, the fact that we've installed the water gardens up there, the rain gardens, does that make a difference, or does that not affect their,
It's
Catching.
still a direct discharge to the saline, so we're already getting that benefit. And now we're just filtering it and it's a little bit cleaner. But in terms of the city's concern about managing stormwater infrastructure, it really didn't have any impact.
It's
Now-
a best practice, but you don't get a reduction.
yeah, it makes sense, but $1,500 was a lot,
Mhm.
I thought. I mean, even if you do it, that's a,
Yeah.
Yeah, the total budget for
100.
stormwater fees is close to $20,000.
Right.
So, throughout the year on all of those sites, so.
yeah.
And it does go up incrementally each year too, by a percentage. So we budget for that as well.
Likewise, if you took out paving, you'd get a reduction. Or
Right.
if you tore a building down, or you went to a permeable or
All
some
right,
way
so
to
it's
recharge.
it's a adjustable process.
It's, can be, mostly fixed because your hardscapes and roughing tend
Sure.
to stay that way.
Right,
But-
yeah, it's
But there
unlikely.
could be some improvements where you could get a reduction.
Good, okay,
Good question.
great, thanks.
There's a pretty extensive spreadsheet that we have that shows all the parcel numbers and which ones are getting a reduction. I'd be happy to send it to you if you're
No,
curious.
I was just, it was more curiosity. I wasn't
Sure.
really concerned that we were overpaying, or I just wanted to
Yeah.
have some understanding of how it worked.
Yeah.
It's been fairly consistent you
Uh-huh.
know, since they started with, and then with the increases,
And then the city's putting that money back into
right? Infrastructure.
infrastructure and,
And-
Which has also helped us, because
Yeah.
that's the fund that they use to help
Right.
with their contribution to the sediment basin project.
Right. So we got a shared,
right,
you know,
yeah.
support on that. So it does help us in that
Right.
way.
Yeah, and it just helps in general. It's not a bad
Right.
amount of money. I mean, it doesn't disappear. It comes back into the community, so it's a good,
Well, unfortunately, as we know, stormwater is often one of those hidden costs. It only happens when it rains, and usually somebody else manages it.
yeah.
But there's a took me personally a little bit to get used to that, but I understand it's a
Right.
way for a community to really put a price on some of those fees and services, and then hopefully offset future improvements.
Right, yep, okay, thanks.
Well, circling back around, we do actually have an active motion on the table.
Oh, sorry. I was
So,
thinking we'd already voted. I'm sorry.
no. So is there any further discussion? On the point? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously in terms of accepting the treasurer's report for audit. Okay.
I'll touch briefly on the areas. There's been activity in the capital budgets. Please note that there's actually stars, asterisks in 2 columns now for this month because of the payables. So there was some activity that was applied back to FY19 and then some activity that's applicable to FY20. So there's columns, so there's kind of activity happening in multiple places here. But we expended funds in the 2019 capital budget on tributes. We also purchased a paint sprayer out of operations small equipment. There was, let's see, what was this one? There was some expenditures on the PRC playground concrete and the playground project, and the, sorry, I'm getting thrown off here. The Meadowbrook Park House had some spending, and then we also spent some money on the final payment on the APNC solar panels, which I think got coded there. Yes, but it doesn't have a star, so it's supposed to. In the 2018 budget, there was spending on tributes. There was a little bit of remaining funds in the operations small equipment budgets of the prior years, so we spent those out on that same paint sprayer. We just allocated it to the older years first and then spent the rest out of the newest year. And then quite a bit of activity in the for the payables for FY19. We closed out the pool pack project. You can see that. There was spending on the Meadowbrook Gateway project, design work. There was spending on the James Room project in a couple of different lines. There was a tiny bit of spending in the Weaver Trailhead project, I think on some signage or something, or plant trees maybe for some landscaping or
I
something.
think it was a signage update.
Okay. And then also the Victory Park Grossbach House demo occurred in April as well. And in the 2016 budget, there was just a teeny tiny bit of spending on, out of the this is the 2017 budget. My goodness, it's been a really long day. Sorry. Construction crew projects, this is the current working budget that Keith's using until he works his way up. So we had a little bit of spending. Again, the paint sprayer came out of this budget. And then we had iTap spending occurring out of this budget on the trail that looks fantastic. I'm so excited about it. And then down under Crystal Lake improvements was for the sediment basin. And lastly, we had a little tiny bit of spending out of the 2016 $500,000 transfer on some design work.
You think we'll ever reach 3 pages?
We were at, well, I used to only present 3 pages,
No, I
even though we
meant 3
had more.
pieces of paper, not 3. I mean, this is 4 years, right?
Yeah, this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
4 years worth.
Yeah. That's
But-
all right. I mean, it makes sense, but it's just.
We got to spend every penny, so.
We do indeed.
Oh, now Andy probably has some updates for you on capital projects.
Yes, I'll start with iTap Park Street Path project. We've had some good weather the past couple weeks, and you've probably noticed as well that a significant portion of the path has been poured. Really all that's left for concrete is the ramp to the main entrance. I think they were finishing up the corner of Park and Broadway this evening. There's another ramp on the east side of Broadway, and then the bench and bus pads. And after that, concrete work for the project will actually be completed. But because of our significant rainfall, we are working through potential delay in landscaping work. So this is being discussed right now with IDOT, Fairgram, and Stark. And the idea is to, since we're getting towards the end of our window for landscaping, which is June 15th, and where the project's at currently, they definitely won't be able to get the landscaping work completed in that optimal timeframe for the spring planting season. It's beneficial for us to have better established plants, and we would push to have this work done, the landscaping portion anyway, in the fall. So that would be after September 15th. So we don't have any final approval on that yet, but the plan is to have start complete all their construction activities outside of landscaping, and then temporarily suspend construction. And then they could use the remaining days that they're contractually obligated to finish by July 13th. And whatever that remaining amount of work days, they would then be able to apply it in the fall when we would restart up construction. So if they got everything done other than landscaping by June 30th, they would have about 13 days that then apply in September to get their landscaping contractor in.
And how much, how much landscaping is there going to be? Is it mostly?
Park and Broadway is a pretty significant portion of the shoreline, and then there's a large planter bed. And then they have plantings along it's in between the lake house entrance and Park and Broadway, and the main entrance, with some stone retaining walls. And then they need to come back and seed all disturbed areas again after they're done. And then the corner of Church and Park, there's a large concrete connection to the existing path where you start circling around Carl. And then in that corner there's a fairly large landscaping zone in there as well.
Good.
Now, planking doesn't sound like plant material, but is it a situation where there's retaining walls and some other things that you don't want them in there until you can protect?
I think the retaining walls will be in before they would
the end of the
suspend
month,
activities.
is the-
And then they
okay.
will do any sort of disturbed soil would then get a cover crop over it.
Okay.
And then we requested as well that they would come back in and do a broadleaf herbicide treatment in late July, early August.
Yeah.
And then when they come back in the spring, then it's prepared for them we won't have any erosion issues on exposed soils and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The other thing that we were concerned about is that as the season goes on, the availability of plants becomes scarcer, and so we've asked them to document that they have plants secured for the fall.
Good thinking. Yeah.
And does the calendar clock start again on September 15? I mean, they would have to get it done by September 28 or whatever it is if
Yeah,
they-
whatever date that ends
yeah,
up
however
being.
many days they.
Yeah.
they-
Yeah.
Yeah, IDOT has a very prescribed method for how this work is awarded, and our initial request was simply just to extend and let them come back in September to do
Yeah.
the work. But they really wanted to make sure that they didn't have any extra days, and so they're motivated to complete the path work sooner, which is good for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're happy with it?
Oh, yeah, looks great.
Looks
Good, yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that's
Getting
nice.
good compliments
Yeah,
already.
good.
Uh,
Can't be a bad thing.
For the rehab project in Crystal Lake Park, we had our staff review of the 60% design documents, and we had a meeting with city, fairgrounds, and Carl representatives to discuss stormwater best management practices associated with their respective zones. They seem pretty receptive to potentially providing some assistance for some of those amenities, but we haven't entered to any agreements at this point. As far as next steps, we just received a plan from ERA this evening that kind of outlines the extent of the native buffer that surrounds the lake. And then she incorporated a draft layout of a soft path that would be included within that. So our staff group will go out there and walk the site and make sure that that alignment's exactly how we would like it. Return those documents to her, and then she'll incorporate those notes plus our 60% design notes. She's finalizing her landscaping portion at this level of design as well, and then once she has all those updates made, we'll be able to schedule our public open house probably later this summer at the lake house.
Good.
Additionally, we've authorized the OSLAD additional services. We got our final paperwork from the state, and didn't want to cause any more delay in the design, so we had sufficient contingency funds to go ahead and award those services. But as you'll see later in the meeting, we're requesting some additional funds for other items. Jump to Perkins Road, Phase 3. We had a pre-construction meeting this morning with our contractor, Diggett and Applied Ecological. Permits are still working through. Don't have final approvals on those at this point. Majority of the heavy work will be done probably starting August 1st, maybe a little bit sooner. But there are a few items that Diggett is able to jump on really soon. It's like mowing, starting to work on the road, the access road, and then the drainage tile from the dog park. So we're working on notices now to plan for a partial closure of the dog park beginning July 8th. And we'll have signage out and go through all of our normal channels, but I did want to mention that tonight. And the last thing I wanted to mention, do you mind getting the projector, please? Thanks. I have just a couple images. This is with our Leal Park improvements. We've discussed in the past the impact of culvers and parking at the site, and the need and for the district to own their own parking and have sufficient amounts available for not only park visitors, office visitors and office staff. So we actually have a bid out right now that we're hoping to take recommendation to award next month to the board. So I wanted to kind of go through that, and then our kind of draft plan for the gazebo as well.
We are coordinating with.
That is not my presentation. It takes a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
No?
I forgot its name and its memory's gone.
Yeah. Plugged in.
And the table's plugged in, right? Like however it needs to be.
Talking between front and center right now.
It should be rear.
Ta-da!
Turn it off and back on again. So I'll zoom in a little bit here to get a better idea. This is University Avenue, Cottage.
Okay.
Here's our existing parking lot. Here's our proposed, it's in our base bid, the parking lot expansion. This was actually the initial plan for expansion of parking when BCA did this parking lot initially. And then we include in the base bid a connector path off this southeast corner to get access quickly from the new parking to the office. We have some alternate bids for some additional path work. The next one would be including a connector from the new parking to this multi-use pathway from IDOT. And then we have a connector coming from the southern portion of Leal or downtown Urbana, and then making this is currently grass, it's turf, making this a connector as well. And then our final path alternate would be to elongate this connection from the southeast corner of Leal, weaving to the northwest corner and connecting to the IDOT pathway. And we have a couple alternates for some fencing. One would be wood fencing, and the other one would be a chain link fence with vinyl slats, and then planting plan for screening as well.
Those darker circles are evergreen, and of those bid alternates, we feel like, well, obviously the base bid, the expanded parking and the better connection with Leal Park are what's really critical. Number two, would provide improved access with the multi-use path, and so it'd be nice if we can get it in there. Number 3, we're actually very comfortable with just doing more of a stepping stone sort of application. In tandem with all this work, and Andy's going to show you, the concept for the gazebo, we envision creating more of a contemplative garden on the periphery of the gazebo. Can you go back to the slide,
Oh,
Andy?
sorry.
Right now, our sign bed up off of University Avenue is where we recognize staff who've lost loved ones, and with the expanded multi-use path that IDOT's putting in and our work, we feel like it's going to kind of lose that quiet, contemplative nature. So moving that towards the gazebo, I think, will be a nice addition, and will really reflect nicely with the new gates, so people can enjoy it from outside, not necessarily from inside. The alternate 4, which goes to the west, that's sort of, maybe really more of a future opportunity. Well, I'm not sure we're going to be able to capacity to get it in here, but by having it in now, we can plan for it and also go through review with IDOT and the city of Urbana. Do you want to talk about the gates, Andy?
Sure. So similarly to, probably 8 or so years ago, when we were having issues with the pavilion at Carl Park that led to us enclosing, and then now seeing very limited issues there since that had happened. We're having different types of issues at our Leal gazebo that's making us really solidified the fact that it needs to be enclosed and secured as a
Every
safety
opening?
measure. I'm
Every
sorry.
opening, so the,
Yes. So this is the design from Dean Rose. He did the Carl Pavilion as well, and the arch at the Playscape. And so we'll have the gates where you can walk through. They'll be locked but able to open, and then everything else would be in these windows secured. This is the design that he has proposed to us, and has a proposal to us, I believe, for around $22,000.
And this way, if issues go away, it's easy to open it up. What we've heard from the work at Carl is that people like it better. It feels safer and more welcoming. There was a lot of uncertainty about what you might come across at the Carl Pavilion prior to the work we did there. In talking with staff that work at Leal, there's also a lot of uncertainty about what you're going to encounter each morning or evening when you walk through there.
There's always a surprise when you walk in. You're like, oh, hello.
It's our biggest crime zone in the district, like Carl was, as far as, those kind of things going on.
So the fence.
Should mention, we, for the last 4 years, really did more outreach, trying to make connections with people and, find resources to help, but we still had that persistent problem of,
is it crime, or is it primarily, or is it just people using it? Is it?
it's criminal behavior, as well as, people sleeping and loitering, which are against, park rules. There's probably a couple of layers, of park rule that we can accept, or, great workarounds, but, it's very consistent with these kind of I hate to say undefined spaces, because they used to be defined, but because of their open nature, they become hard to program in the positive way. So we think enclosing it preserves it, keeps a lot of the vandalism, at bay. I guess if you're cost concerned, obviously the cost staff does in cleanup, pickup, repair, obviously would pay for it, like we knew would happen at Carl Park. Probably the worst is just, the change of use, where it could be
Yeah,
a
that's
pull over
what-
and visit and
yeah,
see.
yeah.
I think the garden trade-off is really a nice visual focal point. I think the other point is we probably had to make some different accommodations, because the way the pathways go through the gazebo when we introduce bikes, it's not an ideal bike way to send people, through a gazebo, on a transportation. So we probably would have needed to do something, to meet our bike ped needs, in the long term. So I feel pretty good about it. I think we've found a way to control the site, beautify the site, create better pedestrian access that connects to the new, road, university-based trails, and a future option to make a, permanent bike connection to downtown. That could be done at a later, plus improve our parking. We're having challenges with our current rental parking, everything from different people using it to having it blocked or changed. So it's okay for temporary, but we think this solution brings, independent use back to Leo Park and the cottage, meets the visitor and, business needs of the site. One of the disadvantages of parking in the back is people thinks the cottage is closed, so we'll get vendors drive by, don't see cars, they won't stop. So trying to create a better access and direct it toward the front of the building, in the long term is better. Obviously, if we knew what was happening around longer term, maybe we could do some trade-off or arrangements or site planning together, but we don't have any indication it's gonna change in the near future, other than what just occurred.
So the wooden fence is it going to the west of the gazebo?
It'll be on the east side of the facility there.
Between the park and the,
Yeah.
whatever that.
Screening culverts.
culverts?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
on that
yeah.
side,
Provided.
okay.
It's, obviously, we used to have while it wasn't necessarily a planned design, planted, some of it was, there were trees that had matured out, that were all cut down, so, the exposed site. I think we just saw an application, they're putting up a request for a variance for a digital sign. So there'll be a nice flashing digital sign, which is fairly standard, for today's businesses. But it's a different look.
This application, it'll be very similar to what we have here at Kerr between us and the neighbors to the east, although here it's kind of more of a meandering organic edge that we're going for with the evergreens, and we plan on planting some native shrubs in the foreground. The fence, we're getting a unit cost, a per foot linear cost for it, and want to go out. At this point, development's pretty far along. I think we've got a pretty good feel for where the screening should end. But at the time of the drawings, it was a little uncertain. There's a significant grade difference, especially as you go to the north, and
Right.
so we'll have to take that into account when we look at placing the fence. We worked closely with utilities to relocate utilities. That was one of the challenges. Was that Culver's provided utilities for the Leo Cottage, or the former facilities that were there. So we had to reroute those all through that same area. So we now have a utility corridor that goes between the evergreens and the proposed screen. I think the other thing I should mention is that one of the things we did is we really treated staff as stakeholders on this. Usually when we do a park project like this, we involve the public at a high level. Here, this is obviously very intensely used by staff, and we heard a lot of different values and concerns about this project. But one of the ones that really rose to the top was just the concern for safety in terms of getting to and from vehicles. And I think the gazebo was one of those things where people really felt like it was challenging. Just last week, I went in to sign payroll at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there were two men that were horribly intoxicated in the gazebo. And when I walked through, I didn't feel safe. When I came back through, I had Karen come out and watch, and she just prepared to call the police if there was an incident. They had taken one of their bicycles and had thrown it and kind of wrapped it around one of the stone benches inside. An hour later, one of them was engaged in intercourse, and Katie had to call the police to have that addressed.
Right.
So it's really gotten to be pretty extreme.
We could go on all night with stories.
Yeah, I've seen
each
guys
of us.
peeing in the bushes over there.
Right.
It's, yeah, not an illuminating sight, yeah.
So the fencing around the gazebo, will it go all the way to the top, or how tall will it be?
I think it'd be more of a foundation planting.
No, the
gates?
metalwork, right?
Yeah, the
Oh, they say-
metal,
oh,
yeah.
Enclosing the windows and the doorways. So basically where there's openness, it'll just fill it like a window, create a grating.
It's really too bad.
It is.
It's a shame.
Some things to note, we've taken a high road in a design to, spend the extra money
Yeah.
to create a look that's better. I challenge anyone to go to any Chicago park and look at their historic structures. They're basically sheet metal, just over the windows or boarding. Obviously they have more of them and there's a cost,
Right,
to
yeah.
this kind of
But yeah,
detailed
and
work.
if you have to do something like this
Right.
is a great choice. It's just too
Right.
bad that we have to make
It
that
is.
choice. That's the sad part.
But I think, comparatively to what we agonized at Carl, obviously it's been a huge success and everyone's happier, safer, it looks better and functions better. And so I think we're pretty confident the outcome will be super positive. It's just, we all agree, it's it's an unfortunate thing that you would have to,
Yeah.
you know, even concern yourself with, as opposed to people respecting public property and admiring it from a distance.
So the line item for security for police, for UPD to come, I mean, is that in effect for certain hours, like just for safety reasons for employees, or?
It's essentially, whenever we see something or need something, we often do have police parked in the lot, because it's a good, you know, speed locator for, you know, University Avenue.
That's
But
good to
they're not on
remember.
patrol. That would be more happenstance if they happen to be there, but essentially you would need to call the police, you know, at an incident. And again, we have other interventions. We work with See You at Home, you know, if it's obviously somebody that's, you know, needs a place to stay, that's one way to try to improve that. But it's usually the people that aren't seeking out those kind of situations, that are just around and living different lifestyles while they're doing that. That
And-
creates a challenge.
To address your question about the police fund that we actually levy a tax for, those funds can only be spent on staff that we pay that are police officers, or contractual service for police that we pay to the city. So we don't have any staff police officers. We have in the past, but we don't currently. And so we do pay the city of Urbana for police patrols, extra police patrols that Corky and Derek coordinate. Typically, a lot of them occur in the summertime around the pools, but also in other areas. So when we call 911 for an incident, that doesn't get directly charged to us. It's when we arrange with the city to have these specific patrols at certain days and times. Does that help?
We also have camps that use the park at the Community for the Arts. They come over every day in the summer, and you know, trying to present a atmosphere that's reasonable, you know, for children.
I still have my park police badge if you need it.
We can't pay you.
That's fine, I'm chasing out for free. Liability issues might be something else.
We'll just post Nancy there from midnight to 6 a.m. every day.
Yeah, I'll be snoozing there myself.
Yeah, right.
Gotta wake up.
I mean, I hate to get into aesthetics, but I gotta say, the ironwork that's on the Carl Pavilion looks a lot more appealing to me than what
We
I'm
did
seeing here.
try to take a simpler, lower cost approach.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, maybe the viewer shed or neighborhood atmosphere at the one location maybe seemed to appeal to the neighborhood, you know, taking a higher style and design something that really fit the architecture. This architecture is a little more simple, so there's a
Yeah,
few attractive, you know, details, but it's fairly simple. We certainly could add to the cost with more, you know, detailed features, or, you know, swirlies, and, you know, Dean's very, very talented in what he does.
Oh, yeah, I understand the cost-wise, it's a
Right.
challenge, but
Right.
to my eye, it looks a little bit like jail bars. I mean, it's, and.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, it has a gating effect.
Yeah.
We would, again, if the board felt it needed a little more design appeal, we could certainly take it back and get in a, you know, little more work done to adjust it. But we tried to think, you know, what would be attractive, meet the need, and not necessarily be overly designed
Yeah.
in an ornate, you know, way.
Yeah.
Take it back to him. You know, with Carl Gazebo, he was trying to pick up some of the great design features. This one doesn't have the sort of, but there may be some ornamentation he could introduce that would give it a more of a formal appearance and less.
Maybe there's a
utilitarian.
way to trade off. Maybe you do it on the gates. There's two gates, and the windows are
And it's-
simpler.
To my eyes, it's a little jarring. You see the nice roof line. I mean, the rest of it's pretty simple, but that very nice roof line, and then it's gonna come down to
Right.
what is pretty stark, rectangular stuff.
Well, we can revisit that.
Yeah.
We have time to do that.
Well, and I agree, I understand this is being carved out late in the budgeting process.
Right, that's why we tried to take a conservative approach, just it was an unplanned, you know, project, so it's more of a reactive
And at the same
approach.
time, you know, you're talking about this being,
Sure,
okay, this is our headquarters.
right.
we're wanting it to be more inviting to the public. That's why we're expanding the parking lot a little bit as part of that. I mean, I think it might be worth at least seeing what additional
We
might be
certainly
done.
appreciate that, and we would agree with that. And you usually get one time to do these types of projects.
Yeah.
So it's always easier to go back and add a little more detail as opposed to try to, ooh, we like it, but it's too expensive, and, you know, move that other direction. Anything else, Andy?
No, unless there's questions, that's all I had.
And moving on to executive director's report.
Had a couple of things. Had a terrific 40th anniversary celebration at the Nature Center. Just wanted to thank the staff. They put a lot of effort and hard work into that to create fun, and they're so good about recognizing anniversaries. All the staff are, but they had a 40th. And it is amazing. I was talking with Judy, and obviously having worked here a long time, and she had worked here a long time, I know when I first started, it always seemed like that legacy idea was somebody else's, and they had a big hand. And now that a number of our staff have been here for, you know, multiple decades, it's exciting to know you're part of that, and that lots of people are part of that legacy. So they did a terrific job and had a nice little group of people there to celebrate, had cake. So want to thank them. Also wanted to thank Planning and Operations for the work at Larson and the tornado cleanup. Today we got a letter from the mayor thanking us.
That was really
in the,
nice, yeah.
so that was an added thing, and they really needed help. Carol Mitten was really appreciative, and as well as their staff, so thanks. And also at the SUNA meeting, a lot of neighbors thanked both the city and the park district, so it didn't go unnoticed. I know I mentioned it in my written report, but the Downtown Get Down first one on May 24th did a great job, but I want to again thank the rec staff and the operations folks that came out. You know, we're doing a few more events, and so that often means a little more sign up, you know, for overtime. So we really appreciate, and we're trying to encourage staff to do it, and we're, you know, very appreciative. We don't want to overdo it, and we're kind of analyzing. We want to take a kind of a step back after the end of the summer and sort of count up and see how the new stage and the new events worked in. We have the, go ahead, Michael.
Are you feeling about the mobile stage at this point?
I think it's terrific. Yeah. The feedback, I'll mention on the aesthetic and the public side, people loved it. It really made the event. I think people felt it was special, and it wasn't just a, you know, truck backed up or somebody's front door, you know, with the band, but
it has sort of
people were like, this is a real event, you know, complimenting. And so it felt good on that.
It sounded
Staff
really
can
good.
mention the operational side, though.
Yeah, on the setup, you know, we're getting better and better. We've been timing ourselves as we set it up, and it's almost kind of like, you know, challenge. I will say that you know, the facility staff are clearly the ones that are most comfortable setting up, but we've got a video now from the manufacturer that staff can watch and learn, and we're working on a laminated manual as well, so that some of our other staff that might be interested in taking a swing at it will feel more comfortable. The day of the training, I was kind of looking around our audience, and you know, facilities was jumping right in, and they're going to it, and some of the ground staff are a little wide-eyed. So it's just it's a new thing. But you know, I've been involved in the training, one setup, and then we went to visit with them before we purchased it, and I feel at this point I could probably, you know, get it set up. So it's not as easy as just pushing a button. There's some other things you need to do in sequence, but it's a much easier installation than the one that we've rented in the past for Jetty Roads.
Good.
Had a little trouble with the high winds the first night with the
sounded like
banners,
it, yeah.
but that's probably something we can figure a better way to do.
Our real challenge is gonna be a week from Saturday when we have Jetty Roads Day, and then after Jetty Roads Day, we have to get it to the Downtown Get Down.
On the same day?
On the same day, so it's gonna be good thing we got a couple events under our belts so that we can, I think they said they could get it packed up in like 20 minutes, 25 minutes now.
Something I should mention too, you know, we discussed as a team beforehand, you know, when we purchased it, it was never intended to be a rental machine that you just send out. It's a highly, you know, piece of fine equipment, and so operating it, there's also cost with that, you know, covering the cost, you know, to have qualified staff, and so we're kind of watching it carefully and taking care of it, you know, maybe down the road, we'll see where we are, but there is cost, and you have to operate it and get it where it needs to go. And so, you know, if we were looking for a rental, we would have probably bought a used vehicle and, you know, just try to maximize your rental out of it. But this was something we hoped, like all of our equipment that's, long-term, take care of it, maintain it and treat it right, and hopefully it'll last for a long, long time.
One last note on it, just in case we have big rain events like we've been having. There are times where we can't use it because it is a heavy piece of equipment. So,
So in terms of the weight on the ground?
yes, so if we get a lot of rain, like at the bike event,
Right.
we had to park it on the driveway
Oh, sure.
in versus out in the park
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of,
We went for a dry run.
we got stuck on the first
Okay.
run.
Wet
Dry run, yeah.
It's a dry, yeah.
Mud run.
So if you hear we had to use the portable stage, the old ones, the
Right, right,
platform
yeah, yeah.
stage, that's why we had to use it, because we can't. There's some parks that it doesn't fit in as well, but
Yeah, yeah,
if we're planning on using the stage, sometimes we may have to go to Plan B.
sure. It's nice to have a backup.
Absolutely.
Also I went by and visited Cunningham Township's Garden Day. They had a big event over at their facility. It was the same day, May 24th, as the downtown get down, and there were about 200 people at the township. There was, food, entertainment, and they've just done a terrific job really bringing people together. And so I was talking with Danielle Chenoweth about their garden program, and maybe there's opportunities for us to work together in garden programming. So we're going to meet with their staff, do a brown bag just to get to know everybody and see what might come out of that.
And where is this?
There's this right on Green Street, right across the street from the library. So we have a couple of
Oh, at their
gardens
building they have.
right at the building. They started indoor plants. By the time they got them outdoor early transplants, it looked like a full mature garden today. I was there on May
Wow.
24th. They're picking and
I need to drive
so
around.
you should. There's
lots
more
to
new
see.
gardens popping
Yeah,
up.
good for them.
They've done an excellent job. It looks nice. It's attractive, and so just sharing ideas, sharing opportunity. So it was really refreshing. And then they encouraged everyone to come to the event that evening. So nice way to work together. I think I'd mentioned last month the art fair is being planned for August 3rd at Crystal Lake Park, and heard back from the School for Designing Society. They'd like to participate and work with us. I think they're interested in doing the mosaic project again, so they'll be partnering with us in the neighborhood on that. Wanted to mention there was an excellent Kickapoo KRT fundraiser last week at the Art Theater. There were 9 short bike films. And I knew that going into it, but when I got there, they were just amazing. The Cycle Club contacted the filmmakers and kind of put the list together. And then the featured story was the Ray Spooner story, obviously the man from Urbana with ALS. that
Oh, right, yeah.
wanted to ride across the country as a fundraiser after he acquired the disease, and very touching and good turnout. Mary Ellen Woolner did a great, in the beginning of the event, update on the construction, so it was real clear. They put it up on the big screen and everybody could see the maps and some of the improvements. They had the director and producer that made the short film there, so he talked about the movie and the Spooner family, and it was really, really neat. So would love to find a way if we could get those films, maybe our outdoor movie screen. It'd be fun to do that.
Yeah.
The very first short film was the one I think we showed the board, which was that short KRT where they start in Urbana. They go through Urbana by Weaver Park and get on the KRT, and they use the drones to take you through St. Joe and all that. It's really amazing to see our parks and our town on the big screen. So it was really good. I'm not sure what they raised, but it was well attended. So I wanted to mention that. Participate in the Urbana Free Library. They're doing their strategic plan also, so I was invited with the local government section and had a really great format, kind of a focus group. So got a lot of good ideas that was shared in the room. They did several community groups. I think they did librarians, past and present. Again, public sessions, and so they kind of did multiple different groups and are working on their plan. But obviously, people really appreciate the free library. I think it was mentioned a number of times, the collaborative programming that they do at the Park District, and people are real pleased on that value. Next, I want to mention the What's in Your Square. Hopefully you saw the little flyer or handout in your board packet. Obviously, it's city's work, but we had one evening with UPDAC, certainly would like to share it with them. But these are the findings. This was shared at the Suna neighborhood. It's out now. We kind of had a review of it, but obviously you can see how often people visit, how do they get there, the type of age groups and the people and where they're from on the first page. Obviously, there's a lot of people from different places that visit there. On the page 2, some visual graphics on why do you go, what's the best thing at the site today, what would you like to see in the future, and this biggest change that you would like to see. Some things I think our staff noted is, there's a number of kind of recurring open space, recreation, arts, entertainment, event elements. So certainly there are opportunities for lots of people to participate there, certainly the Park District. On the last page, you'll notice some of the word clouds and some of the associations that were placed there at the bottom. And then on the back page, some of those leading words of just exciting ideas, the ways people sort of visually and word map. And at the very bottom, they asked the last question, let your imagination kind of run wild. What are some of the most imaginative things you'd like to see there? And so there's some things there. So all in all, I think it was fun.
Came back.
Exactly. A lot of fun
Waiting for
ideas.
that gerbil slide, that's the one I saw.
Right. I know, I was in 2 groups, the Suna group and our UPDAC group.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming every group was very focused, very intent, very intense. People really got into this and really gave them some good ideas. So not sure what the next steps are overall for that 9-block, area, but certainly some good things we've heard. There's some attention on the hotel again. So we'll see how things go, but it was fun, and I think people really gave some good ideas. It was a great idea to use your community to come up with.
I love the Ferris wheel.
Want to just mention climate change was one of our new goals for the district. Organized a discussion group that'll be starting later in the month in June, just to get started on what do we do? What should we focus on? There's certainly a lot of information out there. There's a lot of scientific information, but just sort of how are people thinking? What would we like to do, and how do we begin to think about making that change? Community Coalition, I just want to report our last meeting. We got a very excellent update on the community violence portion of what we do. The Response Task Force has been working really hard. It's not new because it's been going on for over a year, but the trauma and resiliency training is something I would highly recommend for all of our full-time staff and our board. Reasons are, obviously, it gives you that opportunity to have some training and understanding before something happens, and it can happen anywhere. There's been a number of shootings. Obviously, the last one, I think, was a young boy that was killed, and they went through all of the detailed traumatic, kind of a breakdown of what occurs. And so I think that training is something we would highly recommend so that we're ready and prepared. The other part is, I know Roger had talked about, asked me if we could coordinate some sort of training to help commissioners feel more comfortable responding in any kind of situation. So this would be one of those, because they do cover media. What do you say, what do you not say? This program, when it's actually done in a real instance, it's got to be at least 32 hours after the shooting, so there's somewhat of a calm down period. There are services and activities that happen at the hospitals and those kind of places right after. But the idea of families and neighborhoods or anybody that would like to respond coming together is done afterward. The other thing is we would likely identify some of our public buildings as sites that might be available. The way it works is what they want to try to do. The task force wants to get a list of public and also private, faith-based places, and have a very good list so that anytime, day or night, if you needed to organize one of these, you would have a number of places you could call. They understand if you have programming or some other event going on. That's why they want to get a long list of places where they can bring people together and deal with this really intensive situation. So again, we'll work on down the road. There's not a hurry, but I'd highly recommend we do that. We've also talked about doing it with the other park districts and the Forest Preserve. Maybe there's an opportunity for cross training with all of us, but Certainly if somebody wanted to opt out, they'd be able to do that, but I think they've got a really good program and are encouraging all the public agencies and groups to, take the training to get ready for that. Next, wanted to mention some good news. CU Special Recs here tonight. We'll go over the budget, but was noted in the paper they received $100,000 for the improvements to the Hayes Center. As you know, we're looking at options of improving that facility. We just saw at our last board meeting, a couple of draft layouts. It's being refined again, so pleased about that. The space additions, I would describe as modest. They'll be very welcome and definitely improve what's there, but it's not, doubling, tripling, quadrupling the size of the facility, and, they'll be still sharing the space there with the seniors. But still good news and very pleased about that. I can answer any questions that you might have about anything else, if you do have any. Other than that, that's all I had.
Thank you. Moving on to President's Report. Upcoming meetings, there is no study session scheduled for July 2nd. And July 9th would be the regular board meeting where the public hearing on the budget appropriation ordinance and adopting the budget is scheduled in. And there are likely to be some bid approvals to be dealt with. No UPDEC meeting this month. I don't have anything else to add there. Moving on to liaison reports, the Finance Study Group I don't think has met since our last board meeting. We do have one scheduled yet.
I think the 29th?
29th of,
Yeah,
28th of June, yeah.
Yes.
So nothing additional report there. Policy Study Group, that was stuff before us tonight. Is there anything else in the works there?
No, nothing.
And our Urbana Parks Foundation representative is not here tonight, so I don't know if there's anything to report about the foundation meeting yesterday.
I think they did a wrap on the event. Everybody was very pleased about that, so most of the time was focused on that.
Yeah, I think they cleared $3,000. They had, 8 donors, so that everything that came in was,
On the sponsorships.
yeah, sponsorships,
Yep.
right.
Great.
Mhm.
It was fun.
It was,
Really turned out well. I
Yeah,
think everyone
yeah.
was very pleased
Yeah,
for our
yeah.
first major, fundraising event.
yeah, yes, yeah, I thought they did a really good job.
Attract a different sort of crowd.
Did, and I think
Yeah.
we noted that, and that's sort of the goal of each of our events. If we can touch a different audience, it's really a way to get your arms around the community.
Yep.
And the UPDEC study group, planning study group, I guess that's upcoming stuff?
Yep.
Or, yeah.
And this fall? Yeah.
Okay, then we can move on to old business and receiving the draft ordinance 2019-05 to adopt the combined budget and appropriation ordinance.
So at our April regular board meeting, you received a preliminary budget, and that's why this is old business, because technically you've seen a draft of this. Now we're kind of down, we've sharpened our pencils. We know now our final tax extension, our final salaries, all of those final amounts have been entered into the budget. And so now we present the budget and appropriation ordinance. It's posted at our facility headquarters as well. And there's a 30-day period as well as an official notice in the newspaper announcing the public hearing that will be held at the July board meeting prior to the adoption of the budget. But typically, from the point that the budget and appropriation ordinance is drafted, there's no further changes. It's
Right.
typically pretty much set at this point. So you receive a summary version as a draft in your board packet tonight, and then at the July meeting, you'll receive the full budget book that has really a line item detail of every department line item expenditure included, just like you have always received. So tonight, Derek, Corky, Tim, and I, we're going to present to you some of the major highlights of changes from year to year so that you know going into that discussion, the types of things that are different from year to year. Because most of the things stay pretty consistent year to year, but there are some changes we'd like to make you aware of. So we're going to have a short presentation on our budget cycle and major highlights for FY20. If you want to switch to the next slide, Andy. So this is just a brief overview of our total budget cycle. It starts in November when staff begin developing their program budgets. Those, once they're finalized, they're forwarded to the department heads in January, and they come over to the business office in February. Typically, we receive our tax extension at the end of March, and that's incorporated into our preliminary budget. This year, we didn't receive it until the end of May, so we're behind on that step, but I'm going to leave it there in hopes that it's actually then next year. So you receive the preliminary budget in April. We address any final revisions and input from staff, and then we post the notice and the draft ordinance in June and approve it in July. So that's typically the process. But also don't forget that really our budget is a year-round process, because after the budget's approved, we begin the process of monitoring and then revising it at the end of the year. And the board plays a integral role in the review process, in the monitoring process, with your review at every monthly board meeting of our paid accounts payable, as well as the budget reports that I present to you as well. So you play a critical role in our budget process as well, and that's just a glimpse of the staff part of it. This year's budget, this is the revenue summary. So you can see we have total revenues of 11.3 million. And our operating revenues that don't include bond proceeds are 10.5 million. 64% of our revenues are from property taxes. And there's a 0.3% increase in revenues over the prior year. The majority of the reason for that is because our donations and miscellaneous revenue was much higher last year because of the pool pack project. So now we have higher property taxes that's kind of offset that increase. But because the pool pack project's over, we're not receiving this big influx of revenues from the school district for their share of that project. That was a really big swing in our regular operations. The other thing that I wanted to point out on the next slide, Andy.
One comment, Katie. Can
Yes,
we go back
please.
to the pie chart?
Yeah,
Just
please.
going to mention, it came up at the SUNA meeting, and I've heard it before. I think the city and the park district receive about the same amount of tax money. I think we're 12% now, and I think the city's 11. So the mayor, it's similar, I believe you're shaking
No,
your
I
head.
think the city was actually higher.
Yeah, they're a little higher.
Slightly higher,
It's
but-
they're 12 and we're 11 or something
Okay,
like that.
but they're close in that. And I think there's a misconception, because I've had this question asked, will the city and the park district receive about the same amount of tax money? While that may be true, the city has a different source of incomes, and the mayor was able to point that out at the meeting with their pie chart, where if you look at our pie chart, we don't have that many other, significant income based. So again, while the tax amount is closer, there's a whole difference in the actual revenue source. So it's a little misguided because you see the number and you think, well, that's what they both operate on.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we get 63% of our funds from the tax.
We're very limited in our authority to receive other types of revenue sources, like they can levy fees against, like, occupancy taxes on hotels and all these things
Motor
that we
fuel
can't
tax,
do.
things like that.
Right.
But I did want to mention, I think both the city and the park district do a tremendous job of implementing their budgets, and while we certainly are all challenged, I think there's a lot of things we cover and do very positively, so did want to mention that as well.
Yeah, and I intended for this to be an open discussion with everyone, so if you have any questions or comments, just jump right in. But going on to the next slide, this is an overview of our extension year to year. So last year, our extension was 6.8 million, and this year it's 7.2. Our EAV increased by 4.6%. And we had a CPI increase of 2.1, but we realized an increase year to year of 4.8 in our property tax levy. Now, the main reason for this is because $14 million of new property was put on the tax rolls for OSF properties when their exemptions expired with the transition from Presence to OSF. When OSF purchased the Presence properties, those exemptions expired. And now they're in the process of reapplying for those exemptions, but in the meantime, their properties have lapsed and are now taxable. Their tax exempt status has lapsed. So I'm working with the treasurer's office, and I've also been communicating with Carol and Elizabeth at the school district and the city, because ultimately we may be, they either may be issued a tax bill they don't have to pay if their exemption status is approved. They're included in this number is kind of the problem. So they're going to be, they're a piece of that pie that we probably won't actually receive. And it's about a $200,000 piece of pie. So we're prepared for that, and it's nothing compared to what a Carl piece of pie would look like. So it's fairly small piece of pie, and we'll just make sure that we designate that portion until we're sure whether or not they paid their bill. And if they've paid their bill, then we may wind up having to set that aside as a liability if we receive that direction from the treasurer's office. And what would happen in that case is if they've paid and then their exemption status is approved, future tax disbursements would be reduced by that amount.
But they can't make it retroactive?
No,
Okay.
because they didn't own it. Presence was exempt all the way up until,
Right.
So it's just this year. But yes, I mean, they could. So if we receive it this year and next year and the year after, there is a retroactive.
Okay, so they could ask for that money. No, that's too
I
bad.
think it's 3 years, but they have already applied, and I just think it's the state's process. I expect to hear this year about that particular issue. So I'll keep you posted on it, but I mean, that is one of the reasons that we did receive quite a bit of new property this year, is because of those Presence parcels. Because previously in our conversations, I was telling you about all of the appeals that people had been making to their property tax assessments, and how I wasn't sure if we would even have a lot of new property because of all of that uncertainty that our current EAV may actually be going down. And then, any new property on top of it maybe would offset. So I was thinking it would be a little more flat than it wound up being. So that's just the ongoing property tax struggle of our community, and that we just continue to work with. So the next slide highlights our pie chart of expenditures. So we have 8.5 million in our operating budgets, and then when you add in our capital outlay and debt payments, we have total expenditures of 13.9 million. So a big chunk and a difference from last year, which we're going to highlight later in the presentation, is our capital outlay number is quite a bit higher than last year. I have a $2 million placeholder for prior year bond expenditures in the prior year budgets that we're getting ready to spend, not just bond expenditures, but in those capital budgets for all the work that we're preparing to do at Crystal Lake, for the work we're currently doing on the iTap project, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the OSLAD grant and all of that. So we're getting ready to really spend down some of those capital budgets this current fiscal year. So that'll be a big push.
Meredith is going to be very unhappy to have missed these pie charts.
I know, right?
I thought of her. Yeah.
There's a 13.1 increase in expenditures year to year. So, but again, the vast majority of that's due to the capital outlay. And so now, Courtney's going to talk.
Yes, so one highlight here is we are gearing up. It's actually going to take place around October, November, when we will contract with EPAC to get this new software. But right now, when we have summer camps, for example, every camp, each individual camp has a big binder that they carry around from site to site. It's got all the camper information, for medical information for the campers, just all of the paperwork that needs to follow them. One of the challenges with that is we could have a child in arts camp, and then next week they're at sports camp, and making sure that we get that information rather than having them fill out another one is sometimes a challenge, and it prevents, it causes an opportunity for an issue. Definitely if there's a child who has any kind of medications or allergies or anything of that nature. So actually, Andy and I, a couple of years ago, had looked into, we went through a webinar with this EPAC group that at that time they were just starting up. They were partnering with our registration system, which is Active. Actually, the guy who was giving the webinar used to work for Active, so he knew the ins and outs.
Oh, good.
But at that time, we didn't want to be the first one to try and make sure this works well. But what this is able to do is it collects all that camper information. It can, when they sign up, we can send them the forms or a link to the forms. They fill them out, then that information automatically goes into our system, which makes sure we have all the forms that we need on that busy first day of camp. We can do check-in and check-out. So right now we just have a piece of paper that they sign their name on. This way we'll have iPad there. They can click on it. They've checked in, they checked out, who checked them in, who checked them out. We can send messages. So we were supposed to be at Crystal Lake Pool, but it's a rainy day. So we're not at the pool. We're at Brookins. So that messaging can get out to the parents so they know exactly where their child's at. Or, hey, sorry, the MTD bus is 20 minutes behind, and this happens a lot. And parents show up frantic, where's my child? Well, they're en route. So this is a good way to have better communication and better customer service with parents. The other good thing about this is once that form's filled out for a camper, it follows whatever camp they go to. Any camp counselor can look and say, okay, I need Johnny Smith's medical form. And if it's been filled out, which they'll know because it's checked, they can go in there, and even if they hadn't been in camp but 1 week of the 11 weeks at sports camp. So it keeps track, it keeps the information available for all counselors, and we don't have to worry about making sure everything gets moved over from one camp to the next. So there'll be a lot of efficiencies, there'll be a lot of customer service measures in there, and it'll just improve the overall paperwork process for camps. So.
And how do you protect the privacy of the families whose information is in that?
There'll be passcodes for the counselors to get into. Yeah.
I want to say too, this is a pretty small expenditure to be highlighting, but it's something that we're really excited about, and it's going to provide a lot of organizational efficiencies for us. And then there was also some additional expenditures related to this as we were preparing for it that we actually appropriated out of last year's budget. So we're already in possession of the iPads. We're also going to be purchasing cases and rack for the ones at the Nature Center. They're going to have 12 of them because each counselor has one that they always have with them.
Which is also good for program planning, especially at the Nature Center. Having computer space is difficult for our camp counselors to actually be able to sit down and do planning.
And I wanted to say they're already using them. So they're already getting use out of them, even though we don't even have the software yet. So they're going to very good use. And so far, we're really excited about this investment and how it's going to bring us to the next level. And if you've ever been to Urbana Boulders, they have something similar where before you've ever even gone there, you've got all your liability waiver paperwork and everything. It just makes your whole entire onboarding process streamlined. So it'd be great.
I mean, it's really frustrating to a parent when they come in and say, well, I filled that out, but it didn't come.
But we don't have
But
it.
we don't have it.
Yeah.
And so, whether they mailed it and it didn't get to Philip's office or it went to one person but not to others, this will prevent that from happening. Once it's in there, it's in there.
So does that include any maintenance or any?
There's an ongoing software maintenance fee as well. So this is the upfront cost to purchase the software and to be trained. I think the ongoing fee's like
It-
1,000 or 1,500 a year.
It's about 1,500 a year, I think, after this first year.
Oh, that's not bad.
It's worth it for what it does for us.
And you don't have to be connected to, once you have the app,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be, if you have the app on your phone, you don't have to have a wireless signal or anything to that nature. Once it's in there, they can get into it. Once
nice.
it's downloaded to the app. It needs to be to update, but once you're connected, then it'll update.
Nice.
Okay.
From binders into the.
I know, right?
I'll just say, we're including some additional general fund transfers in addition to the usual bond principal and interest fund transfer. I just left the bond principal and interest fund transfer on the screen for completeness, because that's our total transfers out of the general fund. But I thought Derek will probably want to talk through the other transfers.
So land acquisition transfer, that's for the Victory Park houses that we're due to purchase this fall. We also included an adequate budget to include demolition. The transfer to capital improvements fund, these are 3 projects that we've been talking with you all about for some time, I think, but we feel like Crystal Lake Park could use a little bit more help. We're not quite where we need to be in terms of being able to do half the lake edge based upon current engineers' estimates, and this will help in that regard. Leo Park is the work that Andy showed this evening. That's the hardscape portion. So this is the expanded parking lot and connector paths. Also the screening does not include the gates. We'll talk about that here momentarily. And then we're interested in budgeting for a health and wellness facility analysis and pro forma. We don't think this is the whole cost. We think that we'll bring in some partners that can help to offset the cost in working with us on doing this analysis. But this would be locating a facility, looking at what the capital costs are to build the facility, running through our current program, making sure it's what it needs to be, and then looking at the operating costs and potential for revenue. So this is although the smallest number on the screen, a really big number for us to be able to move forward and test this facility more.
As well as the partners programs and putting them into play on a facility.
I just wanted to also pipe in on this as well. We discussed the $300,000 transfer to the capital improvements fund at our last finance committee meeting. The general fund it's over its fund balance maximum. And so that's why we're able to say we want to apply this to a current project now. You know, we're already over our 50% threshold for the general fund's fund balance, and that's, even though we're not budgeting to do that, that's happening because of performance within the fund and things like that staff are performing better than expected. And I don't know if Michael wants to comment on the discussion we had at finance committee.
Well, I mean, it was in that exact kind of context where we were already had a fund balance beyond the range that we had established by our own policy. And we certainly had some needs to be dealt with. And that's far better than building in a structural situation where it's every year. When looking carefully at the circumstance, the money is there now, the needs are there now, but it's not baking it in for subsequent years.
Okay, so this one I was hoping to have the actual agreement here this evening, but we had a couple adjustments to make on the agreement, and Carl actually has their legal adjusting the agreement. But we are in the works, and hopefully we will have it at the next meeting. I'm sure we will at the next meeting have the agreement, but the agreement's going to be $100,000 a year for the next 5 years. For outreach, health and wellness type activities. This year's, so just to clarify how this process works, they came to us, we went to them talking about, how could we work together on some things. This particular process is worked out. This is like the 4th draft of, coming to agreement on what we're going to be working with for this year. This first agreement, I think, it lines it out for the next 5 years, but it also explains how it'll work in the future. So what we'll do is we'll come up with things that work with our mission, things that work with their mission, preferably not things that we can't, more of one time or new initiatives that we'll do this year versus, for example, third grade lessons. We don't want to get into an agreement and have that be accounted for, and then after 5 years we can't do it anymore because we're not receiving the funds. So we're looking for ways to make impact that can help us reach and make more people healthy. So in our community. So this year's 100,000 has come down to the mobile park van that we talked about in the past. I've brought that up. This is more like the ice cream truck idea where we go around to neighborhoods. We will work in conjunction with Carl on their mobile vehicle, as well as, and we're doing some of that this summer with public health. I think I've mentioned in the past, on Tuesdays we'll be at Victory Park for lunch, free lunches with public health. And on Thursdays we'll be at Crestview for the course of the summer. But working with those two groups in conjunction with them, providing recreational activities plus other services for the neighborhoods. So we have 40,000 set aside for the vehicle itself. Once we get the agreement, our plan is to probably go through the state bid because it's a quicker process, so that we'd hope to have this wrapped up sooner, but it didn't happen that way. So we're hopefully going to get it here as soon as possible. Then once we get it here, we plan on wrapping the whole vehicle, make it fun looking, energetic, and then stocking the vehicle with supplies and shelving and those kinds of things, so that we can have all kinds of either arts and crafts, athletics, environmental program, supplies in that vehicle, so that we can pull it out and have fun in the neighborhoods and get more people involved. Yeah. Then there's $5,000 for staffing of that vehicle. We've been working with the Champagne Champion Dreams group that has been like the main starter of the backpack event. And the main leader of that group is kind of moved back to Chicago area, so we're still working with some of the people in that group, but we're trying to take more of an active role, and Carl will be sponsoring that event to help us come up with the backpacks and supplies and admissions for pool for all the people that come and those kinds of things.
Is that the one in August?
Yes, right before school starts. And then there's $15,000 for outreach and wellness programming. That is going to be new initiatives as we meet different groups. For example, we are working with CU Fair to do a special event around Welcoming Week that will involve most likely some band or two and some speakers and from different backgrounds. So that's one idea. Elsie's got several others that she's working with, but it gives us some dollars to try some new things. So we're excited about having some money to get out and do some of those things. The other is a PlayRx/Carl Scholarship Fund. PlayRx is something we've been involved with for 3 to 4 years. The program is run through public health. Basically, families will go there. They have a program that they join into, and part of that is getting them active. And so what we've been doing is giving more or less scholarships for those people to participate in programs. Now, one thing that we didn't have, and one of the reasons it's not as successful for Urbana, was we don't have anything that has memberships
Oh, right.
that we could give away. Most of our programming was soccer, basketball, those types of physical activity type programs. Champaign Park District would give away memberships to Leonard Center. So there's, they can come walk the track. They can. So one thing we are adding to this program this year is we are going to be doing pool passes. These funds will help to cover that initiative. The scholarship fund, which I think is important, it's going to be fabulous. As we do all these outreach programs and get into the neighborhoods, we're going to be going to those programs with basically free program sign up. You don't have to fill out any paperwork other than registration, and so we know what they want to be in and who their name is and their age. They want a pool pass, we can do that too. So we're going to bring it out to these programs, and every family per child will be able to sign up for a program at each event at this point. We kind of got to see how much we're giving away in the beginning so that, we make these dollars last, but the goal is to spend every last dime of it, so.
So does that only apply to youth? Because we had an
Now when
older gentleman.
Not
that
when it comes to
inquired.
pool passes, because you will have to buy a family pass, so we will be doing family passes.
Okay. And then for the meals, you mentioned Victory Park.
Yes?
Summer
So.
Summer?
food program.
The food program,
Mm-hmm.
Urbana Neighborhood Connections is right there, so they come to the park. Will there be, potentially they could partake in that
Yes.
when you guys are there. So will the vehicle be prepared for the number of students that they have for summer camps?
Yes, and I think ultimately what our goal is when we go around in the future with we just don't have the vehicle yet, but when we go around with the mobile park vehicle, it'll get spread out throughout the community rather than just those two parks. But those two parks are kind of our pilot for the summer. And the public health has received some grant funding to accommodate that.
We got today a email from a person in town we know that's, still making the point that our scholarship process is onerous and, challenging. I don't believe we're gonna get to the point where you just raise your hand and there's a scholarship. We have to have some baseline information. And so, we're trying to work as hard as we can to reduce the barriers and the red tape. But I don't know if we'll be in a situation where we could just, you call out your name and, it's provided. We've got to have some responsible way to keep track of things, and
Well, and then pretty soon you don't have any income from the
obviously,
programs.
right.
Right.
So, so we're trying to continuing to minimize the information required, but we have to have some.
What was the main objection of this?
Just, it takes too long, it's too complicated, it's, so, for example, Cork and I were talking, maybe there's other ways, not addressing with the form, but can we provide help? Is there an assistance, help desk, help room, help date? Come here, we'll come to you, we'll send people there, so you need some help filling out an we're gonna help you. Like we send staff to the schools to help students fill out job applications, because, we found that's an inroad. So maybe there's other ways to provide help and assistance as opposed to just continuing to revise your scholarship forms.
Was this a general complaint, or was this a problem that this particular person was having?
I think it was ongoing, somebody that's concerned about that issue and watching it and wanting to know what changes we've made and still suggesting more is needed. So again, we want to continue to work on that. We're always saying, yes, we want to look at it and work on it, but we still need to have some accountability, and, we get audited and we have to keep track of where money goes. And So we have to have some way to track who gets it and how much and that sort of thing. So we're still working on it, but maybe there's a way to deliver a service in another way that makes it easier. So the form doesn't change, but the help that helps you address the form, you know, if it's a language issue.
Yeah, if
or
it's a language issue,
it's-
that's one thing,
right.
but, you know,
Right,
there is some civic responsibility of a person to
We
be
agree.
able to, if you're asking for something, to at least have a minimum,
right.
you know, to say, okay,
And I'm sure one of the issues is, you know, the idea of each group you go to for a certain request, there's often a baseline of the same information. So it's like when you go to a different doctor, tell me all your medication, well, you already have that. You're the ones who gave it to me. So, but you have to tell them again.
Right,
So
right.
it's, I'm assuming that's part of the concern, the redundancy of, could you come up with a one scholarship approach for schools, medicine, clothing? You know, that would be ideal. So a one-stop shop, because we still have different silos, we have to manage information in a different way. But my message is, we're trying, we're willing, we're there, we're gonna keep working until we get the level of help people need to get successful scholarship money to those who need it.
Is there a way to, like, inform them of the process that is much simpler? So maybe the verbiage is too much for them to comprehend.
Right.
So is there something that's simpler that, you know, wherever you facilitate it, or if someone else hosts like a forum, or
Right.
if you're at a school event, you know, a registration, is there something or some way that it can be simplified to where it's easy to understand how the process works on this end?
I
so
would
that
say
it-
yes, there has to be a way to do that.
We have, I mean, from a language standpoint, we've put the information in 3 different languages now.
Right.
Well, not so much as the language, but just
Process.
the process of how the scholarship works. To maybe it's a shorter form, or is it like a group of specific people that, you know, are having issues or raising the questions? Is there, you know, for instance, Learman neighborhood, you have a point of contact person there.
Yeah.
Is there like a time where there's a meeting of some nature that you could, you know, someone could go and meet with them
Right.
to explain the process, and then maybe your point of contact, if it's, you know, broken down in simpler terms for him, that he can explain to them what the process is, so you guys are not having to get constant emails or calls from it, that you have a point of contact person that understands the process
Right.
because you've explained it to him.
I agree. I
And
think-
then you wouldn't, you know, because word of mouth travels.
Right.
So it would get out there in the community, and then maybe we may not be able to weed out everyone, but there would be maybe at a minimum of the same question coming up.
Right.
So maybe it's just interpreting how the process works in
Right.
simpler terms.
Right. Creating more navigators, that's how I'm hearing you suggest, that there's people that know information or know how to get it. Maybe there's opportunities to show up when that's needed most. So those are all the things we can do. But,
And then you won't have to
right.
put in so much work and have to,
Mhm.
you know, always having to explain the same process over and over. Maybe it's just a simpler way of doing it.
Right.
And then you don't have to always, it doesn't always have to be you, it can just be your point of contact person, because they want to remain engaged in the process of what the park district is offering. So to take it off of you somewhat, to have that, you have that relationship with that person. So maybe that's just a starting point if it's East Urbana residents. So maybe a simpler way of going about it, to where you don't have to always feel like you're explaining the same process, but it's just not getting through.
I think the biggest problem, the biggest complaint we get is their amount of money they make and verification of that. But that's also a very important part of what we're getting, because, you know, we give up $100,000 a year in programming scholarships. So we need to make sure that those that are receiving it are definitely
in need. as
ones
opposed to
that are in need of that. And, you know, there are people who know how to play the system,
Oh, yeah.
so
Absolutely.
we definitely want to make sure that the people we're helping are need it.
Mm-hmm. But I think you guys do a pretty good job of screening that. I think it's just, you know, yes, you could have groups that take advantage of that, but then, you know, maybe they don't quite understand, maybe they don't fit into that same criteria, maybe they just don't understand how the process works.
Yeah.
Right.
But you will have people that obviously will try to cheat the system and,
Right.
you know, but looking at the big picture is, okay, we've explained it in simpler terms. Here's our point of contact person that can actually explain it to the groups that would like to participate and may fit some of the criteria of what the need is, but maybe not all the way. But maybe your point of contact person can explain, well, you didn't get the scholarship because of this, right? Without even looking, you know, at their confidential information. Obviously, they can't see that, but just listening to what they did or what they tried to do, then he or she can explain to them, well, this is the reason why, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
When was the last time someone
No, I think
didn't
those
get
are
one
all
that-
right
They
on
might not have
point.
gotten 100%, but, I mean,
There's probably maybe 3 a year that make more income than that don't qualify because they make too much money. So very rarely do you fill it out and not receive something. Whether it's enough for them or not is the other question.
But do you feel like, okay, you're trying to meet every need, and yes, even with the Orange Crush grant, all of that, the scholarship, whatever that money is, plus whatever's in that fund, I mean, there is a cutoff point, obviously, right? You try to meet every need, you try to serve every youth, you've been doing that for years, but at some point, I agree, revenue has to come from somewhere, right? And every organization has limitations to what they can provide to people. And so I guess I'm saying that don't feel like you have to go in the hole because you're trying to meet a need, because you're meeting a lot of needs. You're having a place for a lot of kids to go to engage and participate, right? Because they have nothing else to do really, right? Or there's a activity that they really enjoy and they want to participate in. But also, you know, feel like there is a maximum without having to go into another fund and, you know, because you're trying to meet that need. There is a quota.
Right.
So I don't want you guys to feel like we're doing this. We know that you're doing this, but also just like any other organization that wishes they could help every need and meet every need or whatever the situation is, they have to say no sometimes too, unfortunately, but that is the case. But don't feel like you're not doing enough to meet those needs. It's just there's a quota.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So we mentioned earlier that the Leo Park Gazebo security gates are proposed to come out of a different fund. It's the liability fund. These will be protecting the structure, and we also mentioned some of the staff safety concerns. Another proposed liability fund expenditure is the dog park security gates. This is one we've been working on for quite a while, actually. We've been waiting for our friends over in Champaign to be sure what system they want to use and make sure that they be compatible. There are going to be different systems, but we found a workaround where they can be compatible. We're still talking with them about how best to do that. It may be that you simply get a discount if you have a Urbana pass and you want to go use a Champaign system. Then 2 TBDs here, security camera installation upgrades. I think I mentioned to you all at a previous meeting that the technology has gotten quite a bit better on security cameras, both in terms of just the quality of the cameras, but also the platform that you view it with. We currently have 3 different platforms at 3 facilities where we have cameras, and each presents its own challenges in terms of accessing the data. Now, systems are all online. You can use a mobile application to access your footage in real time. We have a fourth facility where we'd like to add cameras. Currently, we have them at Kerr, the outdoor pool, and the Carl Park Pavilion. The fourth site where we'd like to add them is the lake house. We've been having an uptick in vandalism there. Smashed windows, ripped off screens. It's just been, within the last couple of months, we've seen a real uptick in vandalism. So we propose putting some cameras at that facility. Yesterday, spent time with our auxiliary technology consultant visiting each of these facilities and looking at what we could do. And we'll be getting a price for that soon. The other one is CO2 safety improvements. We currently use acid as our buffering agent at our pools, both indoor and outdoor. And at each pool, we've had issues with spills, and fortunately, we haven't had an incident where staff have been exposed to the acid after a spill. And usually, we come in and find it afterwards, but it's damaged the facility, and at times actually knocked out the electrical at the indoor aquatic center. And so, why we haven't pulled the trigger on this one is that at the indoor aquatic center, there's also concern about monitoring air quality if you're using CO2, and so we'd like to engage the same design team that did the pool pack for us. We feel like they did a great job there, and have them design both facilities while they're at it. But it's really the indoor that presents challenges in terms of monitoring air quality, make sure you don't have any carbon monoxide accumulating in the workspace.
That would be good.
I should just say, as far as the liability fund is concerned, since a couple of these items are to be determined as far as costs and project scope, we have a healthy appropriation in the liability fund for them, but would bring you back further information as those plans continue to develop. So we've just appropriated what's available in the liability fund for those purchases, and still in planning phase. And I think probably Derek's best to talk about this too.
So these are continuation of projects here. The interpretive exhibit construction installation, this is in design currently. This is the new Take a Walk exhibit at the Nature Center. And this would be for the follow-up from the design, the actual construction installation. We estimate it'll be about $65,000. With the solar panels, when we did the initial solar panels, we worked with what we had available to us, but you can see we've got an opportunity to expand and add some additional panels there to the right, and we'd like to do that at this time. We're also budgeting for some pest control barriers. There's been some installations that New Prairie's done where they've gotten squirrels and other animals that have come in and nibbled on their wires. They're not sure we're going to have that issue, but we thought it'd be safe to budget for it, so we've got that included in our improvements there at the Nature Center.
So that kind of covers the gist of some of the major highlights in the budget for this year. Of course, if you have any questions about the budget as the year goes on, we certainly welcome all of your comments and questions. So please continue to bring up anything that concerns you, and we'll continue to answer those.
There was no old business removed from the consent agenda, so we're on to the new business portion of our agenda. First item is action on ordinance 2019-06, annexing certain territory to the Urbana Park District.
Where is this?
So map on page, I'm calling it page 3,
Yes.
Exhibit A.
It's weird because it doesn't even have a common address. It just has a PIN number, so.
Yeah.
But this is a parcel that the city annexed, so we always follow suit.
Yeah.
Each year. They do annexations continuously. They may have multiple a year, but we just do it this one time.
Yep.
So, and they only had one, so.
I don't know where Oak Street is.
Runs along the railroad track.
Well, yes, but which railroad track is that?
It's the CN,
See it?
AC Railway.
But it doesn't make it clear how far north it is.
I looked it up. It's so if you go north of the interstate on Lincoln, you take Anthony Drive over, it's Oak, and then it turns north, and it's almost immediately right there, just north of it, against the tracks.
The asphalt plant is off Oak. I think it's off
Oh,
toward,
yeah.
more toward that area.
Didn't somebody
North of
offer us
74.
something once up there?
So the way to get there is to go north on Lincoln past 74, take Anthony Drive west, and you'll hit Oak, and then you turn north, and it's just right there.
Oh, my. Well, no wonder I didn't know where it was.
Kind of looks like a little bit of no man's land, because the city of Champaign boundary is on
Yeah,
the
they're
one
real
side,
close.
and the city of
That's
Urbana's
correct.
boundary's on the other, so.
Well, there's a lot of weird stuff up there
Yes.
anyway, right?
Yes.
Yes.
If
there's
you
really-
go by
Quite
on the interstate and you
industrial.
look north, you can kind of see
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
undeveloped, unincorporated, although it's both of those.
Well, I move we approve ordinance 2019-06 to annex certain territory to the Urbana Park District.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, let's hold a roll call vote, starting with LaShonda.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. Next up is action on Resolution 2019-06 to accept the fiscal year 2019-2020 CUSR budget.
Grace Tischer is here. Grace is our manager for Special Rec. She'll be working with Corky to walk us through the budget, but I did want to say, one, how thrilled we are about potential changes coming to Hayes. It looks like now some improvements will be coming. I did want to mention too, as we continue to look at our health and wellness facility, there's still space needs that Special Rec needs. I think our arrangement is basically whatever Champaign can provide with any of their building improvements, they're going to do that. We would do likewise. Obviously, the Phillips Center has got some new additions. It's certainly open and available like any of our facilities, but we're really happy about that. Also, really pleased that the work Grace is doing, we're now getting back into our strategic plan goals. So that's a good feeling because we're very close and we had a lot of changes. Now we're circling back and starting to hit that. So we'll likely have a fall retreat and get everything back on. But we've had at least 2 board meetings where we've reviewed and gone over our strategic goals. So I'm excited. With that, I'll turn it back over to Grace and Corky.
So I have provided copies of our detailed administrative budget for you all to look over. And there's comments provided by our finance department for any notable changes in the budget. For the most part, our proposed budget for this fiscal year is very consistent with last fiscal year as well. There's not too many significant changes. Most of those significant changes are still things having to do with not having the expenses from our Spalding Recreation Center any longer. Other than that, there's really not much that has changed from the budget that was approved last year. That's proposed for this next fiscal year. Do you have anything to note?
Probably a big thing is we are setting aside or appropriating money for some type of capital outlay for the facility space. As you guys all are aware, Spalding was torn down, and so that was a major site where we did programming. Right now, we're using the schools in Champaign for our summer programs, but we still have needs during the school year. Like Tim mentioned earlier, we did get $100,000 to help, whether it's with an expansion of Hayes or redevelopment of Hayes.
Is there room there?
What's that?
Is there room at Hayes
Yes.
to expand?
At the site, there is.
Yes.
They also looked at opportunities at the
park.
Leonard Center, the old Leonard Center
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well. So obviously between the 2 options, still working on those. But basically the footprints can be adjusted. There are some existing features around trying to preserve
Oh,
or
because
work
that's all
around.
park, that whole
Right,
area. I was
Yeah.
thinking of
West
all, but
side,
it's all park space
yeah,
there, isn't it?
and
Yeah.
south.
Yeah, on the south side of the building, there's actually a drive there that you could extend the building over, right? Isn't that
Right.
south side?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So at one time,
The street.
we had talked about a gym there.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely space where you can go off the south edge of the building
Right.
out, or you could go into the parking lot area and put your parking more in the park. Or I mean, they're looking at several different options of how they can make that space work.
So what's the main need that's not being met? What's the hardest thing to?
I'll let Grace,
Yeah,
Brian
so-
and Corky probably has it, but go ahead.
With the demolition of the Spalding Recreation Center, that was where our year-round after-school program took place. So when that was first demolished, we finished out the school year at one of the Unit 4 buildings. That was while their school was obviously taking place, so we were utilizing a classroom that was already being utilized. It wasn't really a space that we could make our own. There was just a lot of conflicts with, some of their property being damaged by our program participants, things like that. It just wasn't a great fit for our type of program. So then we decided to actually host our after-school program at the Hayes Recreation Center this year, which showed significant impact just because that's where all of our coordinators are housed. That's where we work out of. So having our full-time staff members in the building where our program takes place just helped tremendously keep the kids, on track better, keep the staff on track better, and just communicate overall. So we really saw a great need for our program to be housed in the same location as our full-time staff members that oversee it. And Hayes really just isn't suitable to host that type of program year-round. There's just not enough space. We do share it with the special events department for the Champaign Park District, as well as one of our 50-plus senior programs. And then all of our offices are there. So the space really isn't very suitable, but we've still just seen, significant benefits having it in that area with us. And then our summer camps, we also hosted one of our summer camps for the younger kids at Spalding. So now we have both of our camps, our teen camp and our younger kids camp together in the Unit 4 school, whichever one they allow us to use for the summer, which has been working out okay, but again, still, it works out better to have our own space because, again, we're just borrowing other people's things, their space, and it's not really truly ours. It's worked out well, but it's just, there's communication barriers. There's just always issues working with another outside organization. So losing Spalding has just impacted our ability to really host a successful program with our kids because we don't have that space anymore. So the proposed changes or expansions to any facilities would primarily be to host our after-school program and then potentially both camps, depending on what size we would be working with, if not just one of our camps at that location.
In your after-school program, how many kids do you have on average?
So this past year, pretty much year-round, we had anywhere from 15 to 18 kids.
Oh, yeah, that's much too.
Yes.
That's way too many for that space, yeah.
Well, and she hasn't touched a whole lot on it, but how many people work at Hayes right now, full-time?
Full-time. So we're going to have 4 full-time CUSR staff as well as a full-time receptionist, 2 full-time special events for the park district, and then also a almost full-time senior coordinator. So about
So that's 7 full-time
Get
staff.
rid of them. Just take over the space.
That's 7 full-time staff. There is the reception area where one of them works. But the rest of them are in 3 offices.
So it's comparable to our staffing needs at this building or at Phillips,
Right, yeah.
where you have a number of professionals working with other staff.
Yeah.
Um,
So hopefully being able to address some of that. Special Rec for years now has had at least 3 employees working in one space, which is not ideal at all, the way that's set up. So,
My quick takeaway, they looked at the old Leonard Center and the Hayes Center, and what I was hearing staff say is there were trade-offs. Both offer something, but it seemed like, correct me if you guys change your mind, it sounded like Hayes had the accessible playground, the whole site seems to function as a whole site. You know, they have a park and there's some recreational facilities, while the other facilities are at the, you know, Sholem and new Leonard Center. You know, it's just some trade-off. So I think the idea was to continue to work on some plans to see what would be the best fit. Thing I noticed that seemed to help on either of those is large activity rooms / I'm gonna call it small gym or some sort of activity space, because they don't really have a large, you know, uninterrupted space
Right, and
to
there's
work
no
with.
space at Springer.
Not that's unprogrammed. That, you know, that, again, there's programming you could go in and use, but not, we're gonna change everything to make it the way we need it for that. And the other, Grace should be talking instead of me, but something on the cusp that we continue to talk about strategically is, again, it might not even be today's highest need, but day-long, adult-long programs for adults. You know, as our so-called kids age out,
Right.
having
They
a
still need that
appropriate
assistance.
age program for adult participants. And we don't really have the ability to mix the adults easily with the younger, you know, based on the current facility. So
But they
that's
wouldn't, go ahead, they
No,
wouldn't
that-
necessarily need to be in the same place, right?
correct.
But you
Correct.
still need to have the space.
Space and a program
yeah.
and staffing that go with them. So we kind of look at that. I always bring it up because, again, I've seen a lot of our participants starting to age and, you know, and their needs change over time. And so you have to have the appropriate, you know, program and facility for that. Back to you, Grace. What else did we skip? Anything else that's really critical?
I think you hit most of it.
I guess not necessarily from a budget standpoint, but just talking as a whole, for special rec, Grace is really starting to take the leadership of that program area, and it's great to see, like Tim said, getting into the strategic plan, getting fully staffed to where we have 3 coordinators and a manager. I see really good things moving forward as we continue through the strategic plan. Probably an accomplishment we really want to talk about and we'll work more with. I know it's kind of, over the last year, we haven't had a lot of contact with them, but we did start an advisory committee. And so, you know, they have studied some of the building needs. So I'm excited to see what kind of input they can provide special rec as we move forward.
Is this different from I mean, there had been an advisory committee years ago. Is this?
Years ago, this
And it was
is,
curtailed and then it was restarted.
Okay, so it's essentially the same kind of
Concept.
thing.
Yep.
Okay.
So it'd be a great project for them to
Yeah,
sink
yeah.
their teeth in and, you know,
Yeah,
looking
absolutely.
at,
And
again, while
provide-
it's modest.
there's a variety of people that are on that committee, but there's some school district staff from both districts, Champaign and Urbana. And there's group home representatives, and so it's a good group.
Good mix, good, good.
That's all I have.
I had a question on the first page of the budget, I guess it's page 30. Do not use property tax, is that carryover? Is that what that means?
It's like they
41012?
yeah, they just had extra account numbers that these other ones took the place of.
So what does
I
that
think,
mean?
you know what I think it was?
I didn't notice
think
that
that
till
those
now.
3 numbers used to be the Urbana Park District amounts, because those amounts were how much we budgeted last year, but see, she moved it all down to contributions. So she basically deactivated those after FY18 and started using these other contribution accounts down here under this other section. I noticed that too. But you can't get rid of them because there's history in them. So we kind of run into problems like that too. And so like, that's where summary reports are nice, because you don't have to see all that nonsense. But it happens.
I'm glad you said
Right,
that, and not.
right.
It's okay, it happens,
Almost
I
CPA.
understand.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think some of that was with making sure we were tracking everything for fund reserves and those kinds of things.
Right, because there's been, over the years, there's been substantial carryovers, I recall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, to me, what it looks like is they used to track it as an actual property tax revenue, and probably at some point along the way, Andrea or their auditors or somebody said, no, technically, we are a contractual service for CUSR. So we're allowed to levy this tax because of this agreement.
Yeah.
But when we send that money to Champaign, it's a contribution revenue, not a tax revenue.
Gotcha.
for that.
Okay.
That's why.
That makes
So it makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah.
We don't usually see this level. This is nice to see, and everything looks good to me.
I love the notes on the right.
Is it reserves or is it reserves?
Dare I ask, I mean,
It's a combination.
in the form that was actually included in our packet, I mean, it gets down and ultimately net of revenues appropriations, it's $600,000 in the hole. Where's that money ultimately gonna come from?
CUSR reserves is what I believe it's coming from with that $1 million capital outlay
Yeah.
that they have.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the last page of the detail one, I think it does a pretty good job of showing the capital outlay, is really what's driving up the use of fund balance reserve. And that's appropriate because of the decisions we made in the last year to allocate a portion of their fund balance towards additional capital, because they'd really built up more reserves than.
Yeah, they
needed
had a
for that
lot,
fund.
yeah.
So, that's what helped fund the James Room project for us, and then apparently what's helping with the Zahn Park ADA path for them, so. You guys have plans to use the James Room kitchen at Phillips?
Yes, I know our adult program coordinator is working on hosting some like adult cooking classes or just kind of programs that they can utilize the room. We saw it at a meeting a few months ago and we're really excited by it. So she does have plans to use that in the future.
I just have a quick question. So we're approving this, but this time last year, we didn't have like everything from CPD either. So I'm just curious, is it the same situation?
I guess I'm using different words. What we provide is oversight, comments, and the Champaign Park District actually technically approves the budget, because it's part of their budget. But it is our opportunity, if we have comments, questions, concerns, to raise them with the staff and board. And certainly we could take it
Yeah.
back.
And actually, I wouldn't say we didn't have what we needed because we did have the summary.
Yeah, just not the detailed.
We just didn't bring the detail, we didn't get the detailed in the board packet by Friday morning, but we had this, which is,
You're talking about
the rough shot of it.
last year. You were speaking about last year?
Well, I was just reading the notes from the agenda and trying to make sense of, we're looking at this. Last year, we had something similar. I don't think we had
Right.
this per se, but I think they were wanting us to approve, and we weren't comfortable with approving, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
So I was just curious of the notes itself and trying to make sense of what we have in front of us.
yeah, like Tim said it, and the way it's been we've always done a review and a cursory look over what they're going to be presenting for approval at Champaign Park District, and they're going to do that tomorrow night, I believe, is their board meeting. But technically, there's never been a real approval by Urbana Park District. It's just been a cursory review. This is what's going on. And do you have any questions?
Or concerns, certainly. It would be the time to raise them. Likewise, when we were the administrative agency, they did the same. They did a review, and our board ultimately approved the budget. It was part of our management.
Right, we need a motion. What does it say?
I'll do it.
I move we approve resolution, resolution 2019-06 to accept the fiscal year 2019-2020 CUSR budget.
And is there a copy of that resolution here?
Oh, well,
A resolution, but it's probably not the correct one.
Let me see if it's in the signature file.
right. That's the annexation one. It's this one.
Yeah, I just see that one.
Yes, it is in the signature file. We do have a resolution. We have two copies, one for them and one for, just a one-pager that says, see attached Exhibit A, which is the summary.
Which is this?
No, the summary,
it's
summary page.
the short one that was in the packet, but the resolution was not.
Do you need more than that?
Well, I mean, I'd like to take a quick look before we actually formally approve a resolution.
Sorry about that. We can make copies right now if you'd like.
We'll save some leaves. Oh, I hate whereases. Why can't lawyers just say what they mean instead of sprinkling it all with whereases? You ought to have a banish the whereas. Oh, this is
Well,
just that
well,
right there.
I just want to be sure there was actually
Certainly.
something.
Of course.
Well, I'm glad you checked, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the
All right, so now
annexation
that
one.
we've seen it, my motion stays the same.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, let's again do a roll call vote, starting with LaShonda.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries unanimously.
Grace can go home.
Thanks, Grace.
Thanks,
Thank
Grace.
you.
Thanks, Grace.
See you next week.
Thanks for all your hard work.
Okay, moving on to Meadowbrook Park Gateway Project.
Okay, we received a donation in the amount of $50,000 from Dixie and Greg Witt. My little less than 2 years as project manager, this is actually the second project that they've provided donations for, so I think it's good to keep commending that, what they've done for our district here, and continue hopefully to do so. So this is for a gateway element in Meadowbrook that would help tell a little bit more of the history of the park and the features. I've included some attachments with the memo and have them up on the screen as well, and would be happy to answer any more questions and go through a little bit more in detail if you'd like, but this is kind of gives a better idea of the overall look of the amenities. So we have Corten steel cutouts that are fairly large, I think about 15 feet up, with a wood kiosk sign that will then have our different pieces attached to it that I'll show in a little more detail. And then you can see the concrete base here will be like a half circle with a Corten steel footings with prairie drop seed cutouts, and we'll actually include some butterflies as well now.
So obviously this borrows from some of the same kind of vocabulary we developed at Busey Woods Gateway, but brings a unique flair for Meadowbrook, whereas Busey Woods is more woods inspired. This is more of a prairie inspired theme.
And so here, just to kind of give you a better idea of how it would be laid out at the site, this is the Race Street parking lot. And you can see my Google map cut out here to help give you an even better idea. And we'll have a semicircle kind of in this corner here, and then have our kiosk sign oriented where the reader would be facing north. And that's because we have a map update of the Meadowbrook site as well. And then here's where our Corten cutout would kind of cross over the kiosk. So like I said, it's telling a story of the history of the park. It's starting out as prairie, and then turning into farm, and then with the efforts of the Park District, returning it to prairie, and then kind of gives a little explore overview of Meadowbrook Park as a whole. Here's our map redesign. It's fairly close to what's currently out at the site, but it's kind of made to blend in more with the overall concept of the gateway element. And then throughout the map, we'll call out particular features, and then corresponding with the map, we have the features panel then that could provide the reader, if they wanted to find out a little bit more information before they actually go walk and discover the item, they can read a little bit about it next to the map. And then we have a little recognition for the widths. And then this is our overall Meadowbrook Park sign on top of the kiosk, and then On the back of the kiosk, it's kind of, you know, something for someone that maybe is exploring a little further around the piece to find just a quote that our staff had selected to include. So, we had bid the project in April. We had 7 plan holders. Taylor Studios was the only bidder, and they submitted a bid that was about $15,000 higher than their estimate that was provided by them in the design phase. So we did some further investigation, and Derek talked to one of the representatives about exactly what was happening, and it turns out that their main subcontractor for the signage work wasn't able to provide them with their proposal in time to submit to our bid, and so they ran out of time and they had to go with a higher price option than what they had received during the design phase. So worked with them, and they took some more time to get the updated proposal from their normal subcontractor, and then submitted a revised bid that actually brought us back down by about $15,000, like I said, and took us back into budget. So funding is, you know, primarily almost entirely funded from the WITS donations. Any additional funds would come from the general contingency in 2019. I think there's $60 over the actual budget, but then we're recommending to assign a $5,000 contingency on the project as well.
I'll remind you all that this is one of 2 proposed gateways. The other is going to be over off of the Windsor parking lot. We're hopeful that once this one goes in, we'll get some enthusiasm and folks will want to do that one for us. Taylor also designed a number of other interpretive elements throughout the park. There's a similar large installation near the interpretive center, and then some other smaller wayfinding throughout the park. And we feel pretty good about interest in giving at Meadowbrook, and so I think this will just kind of carry it forward as we get to do more of these installations in the park.
Just another reminder too, that WIT's original gift included funds to support 2 sculpture acquisitions. So their original gift was higher. This was the portion that was allotted to the interpretive, just in case you were tracking and thought that was a different number. This is the portion that relates to this part of the project. The sculptures have already been purchased and that part's been done.
Was that Grace out there in the hall? Somebody was just walking out.
No.
No, that was our Sandra.
Oh, okay. I just saw a flash of
Yeah.
color. Okay.
Yep.
I didn't want her to be lost. I couldn't find her way out. Or set off the alarm or something exciting like that. All right.
Okay.
Are we ready for a motion? Are we going to do it? Shall I do it?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
I move to approve the Meadowbrook Park Gateway project in the amount of $38,537 and a contingency of $5,000 to Taylor Studios of Rancho, Illinois.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, let's again do a roll call vote, starting with LaShawn.
Aye.
All right.
Aye, and that carries unanimously. And brings us to the item of approve the Crystal Lake Park Rehab Phase 2 design contingency increase.
Okay, in December, the board awarded the environmental services for our Crystal Lake Rehab Phase 2 with a 20% contingency at that time. That was a little over $19,000. With that proposal, we only had a conceptual plan of stormwater best management practices included in their scope of services for design. Now that we've gotten into our 60% design phase, staff have reviewed the concepts for those BMPs, and we are ready to move forward into the final design and incorporating them into the construction of the project. ERA provided a proposal for those BMP additional services. We have not yet authorized, and that's attached to your memo. The additional services related to the OSLOD grant, at the time that we awarded that contract, we had not been awarded the grant. so we did not authorize any of those additional services. Once we received our documentation from the grant, we had all the signatures we needed and were allowed to start spending money on that project. We went ahead and authorized those additional services so that ERA could start scheduling out their survey crew, and we wouldn't face any further delays related to incorporating those into our design. So I have the budget outlined. I'll kind of give you a snapshot of where we're at with our contingency on the project. Like I said, we had $19,027 for our original design contingency. We've authorized the OSLAD design services. That's $14,443. So our remaining contingency tonight is $4,584. Our B&P proposal was $6,187. So at this time, we wouldn't have enough contingency funds to authorize the B&Ps. And then we would also not have any more contingency dollars authorized from the board for ongoing project needs. So our recommendation is to increase the design contingency by $15,000, which would then leave a total remaining contingency on the project of $13,397.
I move that we approve an increase in the design contingency by $15,000 for the Crystal Lake rehab. Can I say rehab or do I have to say rehab? Rehabilitation project.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Again, a roll call vote. Starting with LaShonda.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. And we're now to action to approve an iTap construction engineering contingency increase. So,
Yes.
Money.
Another contingency
Tax and
increase.
spend.
So I provided updates previously to the board about the delays that we've had from construction and the weather. Significant rainfall events in the spring have caused compaction issues in the subgrade that took more time from Fairgram, our engineer on the project, to come out and evaluate those conditions and make sure that we were proceeding at the correct time. Also, they have to have a staff person at the site almost continuously during construction activities to fulfill requirements from IDOT to complete reporting, take measurements, fill out a bunch of forms. So as this thing keeps extending further on, we noticed on invoicing that the bucket was kind of starting to fill up on the funds that we had available for their contract faster than the construction was actually getting completed. We reached out to Fairgram and requested that they would evaluate where they're at on the project, and we wanted to make sure that we were ready in case they needed additional services to be authorized, that we wouldn't be delayed and have to wait for an upcoming board meeting. So Roland White with Fairgram provided us a letter. He sat down and did some estimation to close out the project. His estimation was that the additional funds that we would need, $6,140. And we have currently, our design contingency is 15%, which is $5,622. So that would leave a contingency deficit of $518, and again would leave us with no contingency money to finish out the project. So our recommendation is to increase that contingency by $5,518, which would then cover the estimation by Roland to close out the project and then leave us some room for any other unknowns that could occur. And this is budgeted from the 2019 capital trails money, which is our plan to use for any sort of iTap overages, and then whatever's left over will then be applied to Crystal Lake Park.
For folks that might be viewing at home, I'll just remind everybody that this is a project where our local match is coming from Carl Foundation Hospital, 20%. The other 80% is coming from the iTap grant. So the park district's got very little funds in this. And in this situation, we just had an extraordinarily wet spring. I think our contractor did some calculations, and it's truly, the sort of conditions that they're having their own challenges, but as we've noted, our engineer's been challenged as well just to keep up with the project, and they've had to spend a lot more time on site than anticipated. And if we're successful in getting the landscaping pushed back to the fall, that'll further stretch it out.
I was just gonna throw my 2 cents in, having managed lots of projects, it's a terrible, you never want to be in a situation, there's worse situations, but certainly everyone's acting in good faith up front when they put their numbers down, but then there's a whole lot of intangibles you can't anticipate that do have impacts and and it's always uncomfortable for everybody, for the contractor, for the, engineering group, professionals, and for staff. But when everyone's working in good faith and you can point to what's going on, the responsible thing is to get the project done and do it in a reasonable fashion of time.
Yeah, now, if all this money is spent, this is all going to our engineering advisor. This is not increasing the construction costs at all. I mean, the ultimate project cost, yes, but.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We've had everything over the years from people just absorbing the cost to not able to do that to, trying to identify what caused it and what the needs are. And we just analyze at each situation and make the best call forward.
I move that we approve increasing the design contingency by $5,518 for iTap Construction Engineering to Fair Graham of Champaign, Illinois.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none. Again, a roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that, again, carries unanimously, which is required tonight with only 3 of us here.
That's right. Good thing we're such
I know.
agreeable people.
I know. Thank you.
There was no new business removed from the consent agenda, so we're on to comments from commissioners.
I have a question about the downtown get down. So is this event supposed to be comparable to Friday Street Fest in Champaign, or over time to equate to what they're doing over in Champaign, or what's the purpose behind it?
Well, I'll go first, then Corky. I mean, obviously, 2 years ago, we began discussing how do we create more opportunities in downtown. Everyone likes that idea of events and happenings, and so we looked at a wide variety, looked at all the events that are already happening, and then determined that if we're going to do things, probably some cultural, entertainment-based type things. Certainly the Friday Night Live in Champaign's very popular, successful, but it wasn't necessarily to try to copy that. And but all those downtown fests are similar. But really the idea, the point I wanted to highlight is if you can get the right mix, get the businesses enthused and involved and participating, get your public to show up at each one and bring friends and bring a large number. And then in our case, our 4 units participating to cover the cost and all the staffing, where you pull your resources together to try to offer something that probably neither of the individual groups could offer on their own. So our structures are quite a bit different. We are working with, similar type groups. So the answer is yes, it is similar to that, but it isn't necessarily to try to steal that audience or reproduce that same event, but bring a unique Urbana experience to it and also see where it goes. There's opportunities, for changes and, new inputs, but Corky might have.
We want it to be better, actually. We are providing, child care. We're putting on activities for the children. So we're hoping to bring the community together and provide a unique experience. So I wouldn't say I necessarily want it to be equivalent to Friday Night Lights. We just want it to be something special for Urbana and unique. And by providing the child care, the other artists that are there outside of music, we're hoping we can do that. And it was a trial for a partnership between 4 different groups. So,
With it being the 4th Saturday, starting in May, does that affect what you all do for Jetty Rose Day? Like you have staff there, like you guys are there, but then that event is right after
we
that.
will roll out after yours, after Jetty Roads Day, and move to downtown and So typically, setup is around 2:30 at the downtown get down. And we're not doing anything different than what we do with Jetty Roads Day, and when we're done there, we're moving.
It would extend number of hours and staff
gonna
to
be
pick
my
up.
question.
Yeah,
It's gonna
to
be a
pick up
long
that.
day.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, you're in event mode, so hopefully you can do it as efficient, and timely as possible.
Yeah.
But that's part of that. We want to go back and evaluate how many people did it take, how much labor, what that cost, how much did, we get supported in cost, and just really compare it and see where we can go. We always like to add more and do more, but we still have to, be responsible. So I think not biting off more events, limiting it to the 4 main months was a good start to get it in as a trial. And we've discussed, we're not guaranteeing, and for folks listening at home, if any of the budgets in those groups shifted, we would have to make changes or eliminations. So we're not necessarily guaranteed we can continue this forever. But if the funding holds and people respond, certainly if we could get more support, either through sponsorships or anything to help offset costs, that'd be great.
I'll walk through there, I think at the beginning, we got there right at a little bit after 5.
Yeah.
And walked around, and I think it was still early yet, so a lot of people weren't out there at that moment, but people started trickling in, and partaking in the sound stage was great. The band that was up there was great. And then it seemed like there were more tables on Race Street than on Main Street.
We had crafts and arts on Main Street, and then food and other vendors on that North Ray Street section, primarily at the Courier. They brought their outdoor food operation outside, which was really cool.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of involvement we love to see. I talked to Alan Strong. He said, hey, this was great. We really enjoy this kind of, event. And, they had considerable work. They had to bring tables out, and they had staff and some setup and whatever. That's awesome to get that kind of response from your businesses. Now, not everybody's going to respond that way, but over time, we hope we can create, are we creating opportunities for the businesses as well? Then you have a really good partnerships.
Right.
So where they're benefiting. And again, some of the businesses, if you had, I'll just make up, you had coin purses, that's all you sold. You might not have a huge market at an event like that to buy coin purses, but, depending on what the market or service is, if they choose to be open, that might help benefit their business. So you have to understand a little bit like that.
Right.
But most, all retail or bar restaurant generally, get a little bump from that. And then certainly community groups out so it can grow, more vendors. So it's definitely in the trial, to make sure people are enjoying it and getting a benefit out of it.
Yeah, and I think that one food truck, he participates in Sweet Corn Festival.
Was it
I
the
think
pizza truck or
the barbecue truck.
the barbecue truck?
Yeah.
I don't know for a fact, but I'll say yes, because there are many trucks and a lot of them are the same groups that are out there. And that's the other thing, creating good relationships with your, other vendors for the event, your food trucks, your drink suppliers. The more you can work together, it works for them, it works for us. So
I do know that the programming staff of all the different groups, Janet and Rachel, and they're working now, they're going to be tweaking the setup a little bit after the first event.
Yeah.
So, we're learning as we go too. So there's a lot of barricades between the bounce house and the kids area. I think we're going to eliminate some of those barricades and try and condense things so it's more, it's not as elongated to where it's
tricky.
too spread out.
Right.
It may have looked a little more spread out, but if you had double the crowd,
Right.
it might just be right. And so I think the anticipation was spread things out in case you get that big crowd. Certainly you can adjust those, based on real numbers or likelihood.
Right. Trial and error.
Yep.
Trial
Yep.
and error. Thanks.
Good questions.
Any other commissioner comments? Okay, then I think we've completed our agenda. I'll declare us adjourned.